Welcome to the season 9 finals of the VML. We are really excited. We've come a long way and we have now the top 8 for you all. I'm joined by two amazing people. I have Sky and Arya. Arya making a comeback after some time away from the VML. How are you feeling today?
I'm feeling really well. I'm so excited to be back in the booth casting the finals.
Great, and we have a lot of things to see. First, we have to, of course, thank our sponsors, Good Lake, I5, and also Wizards of the Coast. Without them, it would not be possible to make this show run. And we had 128 players this season 9 of the VML, and only 8 standing. These players already got an amazing achievement. They got qualification for the VML finals, which is going to be held after season 10, and we also got a qualification for the regional championships, which is actually a great event to be qualified for, and the path for the pro tour. Right now we are going to see first a match of the top 8, and then we are going to actually have the semifinals live, both semifinals and of course the finals. Can we take a look at our player deck and our player slides for the first match? Oh, let's do the bracket first. Let's do the bracket first and also take a look at the meta breakdown. So here we have our bracket, the players that made the top 8. We have Talia, Jen, Duen, Skyler, Tania, Brittney, and our feature match is going to be Jzjaws, and Temur for life. This is going to be our first feature match. And let's take a look what these players decided to bring to play this weekend. Taking a look at the meta breakdown, we have 2 Rakdos mid-range, 2 Esper Legends, 1 Rakdos Sacrifice, 1 Jeskai Control, 1 Azorius Temper, 1 Esper mid-range. And tell me, Arya, how do you feel about this meta breakdown?
I think it's super exciting. There's sometimes near the end of a set, just before a new set comes in, standard gets kind of stale. There's only one or two decks. That's clearly not happening here. We've got 6 archetypes among 8 players and uh, lots of diversity and unusual and off meta decks. So I'm excited to see how that pans out.
Skylar, I see here that we have a comment. Where is the Grixis at? And why do you think people didn't bring Grixis or Mono White, which were one of the most popular decks before?
So those decks are definitely strong, but an area they fall short on is they're really easy to prepare and tech against, and everyone knew they were coming. So decks have been built to just be a little more resilient to what those strategies do.
Amazing. Skylar, tell me something. If you had to bring one deck, what would you bring?
Well, I would probably bring something within Rakdos because if we take a look at this breakdown, there is a lot of black in this. And gee, I wonder what the prevalent causes for that could be. Could it be an Invoke Despair, Shieldred the Apocalypse? I mean, I would probably go with something with black in it, probably something within Rakdos most likely, but don't cut out those Esper decks. Those are some also very, very strong decks, and I would look out for those as well.
Yeah, definitely. As for Legends, have been making great results in regional championships that we've been seeing, and a lot of great decks here showcased. And I'm really glad that we have such a healthy and diverse meta breakdown. Can we take now a look at our players' slides? And first, we have Temur for Life, and they decided to bring these Esper Legends that you were just talking about. What do you think of this list, Sky, and anything different than your typical Esper Legends? Anything that goes to your mind, or just regular Esper Legends that we've seen over and over again?
This looks like a pretty run-of-the-mill Esper Legends. Here we have the Skrelvs, we have the Denix, we have the Rafines, Shieldreds, etc. There's nothing here that really super stands out to me. Maybe AO in the sideboard, but I've also seen AO kind of flying around here. Anything about this deck stand out to you, Arya?
I think the thing that stands out to me most is the fall wedding announcements. I know a lot of Esper Legends decks recently have veered on the side of sticking to almost only creatures, just a couple of Go for the Throats as the only non-creatures in the list. And wedding announcement, it's been in and out of decks. It's come back a little recently. It's not great with Talia, so that's part of the reason it's been played a lot less. But it makes a lot of sense for a top 8 like this when you're seeing a bunch of Rakdos decks, really grindy decks against which you want to get as much value out of each permanent as possible. Wedding Announcement's an excellent choice for that, so I think it's a really smart meta call to have it in this specific Esper list.
Yes, and what is Temur for Life going to be playing against today? Looks like Jzjaws bringing Rakdos mid-range, and we see here Rakdos mid-range being picked over Grixis in this top 8. And Arya, why do you think that's happening?
Well, part of the reason this is happening is actually something we saw from Team for Life's list. There were two copies of Razor Lash Transmogrant in that deck, and the main strength of Rakdos is you're only running two colors, so you get to run a lot of basic lands. So your opponent doesn't get to have a free 4/2 that they get to keep bringing back for 2 mana. So mostly, I think Rakdos is chosen a lot because it gets to run basics and turn off things like Razor Lash Transmogrant and Furnace Punisher that's specifically built to punish people who don't play enough basic lands.
Amazing. And Sky, do you have anything to say about this specifically matchup we are about to see Rakdos versus Esper Legends? Do you have any opinion on this particular matchup?
Well, I think the card to look out for here is Rakdos is running the red. That is the different color between the two decks. Fable the Mirror Breaker, one of the most reliable cards in all of Standard. Will Fable the Mirror Breaker's card advantage be enough to overcome Esper Legends before Esper Legends kind of spirals out of control with everything it's got going for it?
Let's see what happens and let's take a look at our feature match of the top 8. First of all, congratulations to both of these players making into the VML Championship Finals and also the Regional Championship. And we see here the side of Temur for Life, and they have Wedding Announcement, Airtie, and 5 lands. Arya, what do you think of this hand?
I'm not a big fan of this hand on the play. It's good because double Otawara means it's not actually all lands. Otawara is functionally a spell in these Espedex and a very good one at that. But what defines these Espedex is you have a lot of threats that can take over the game, and not being able to get down something like Skrill, Vodenic, or Talia in the first 2 turns is quite a rough start. Though probably better than a mulligan against a deck like Grixis, where every card really counts.
And also, one thing that I see is there's 2 Otawaras, so maybe we should consider the second Otawara as more like a spell instead of a land. What do you think about this, Sky?
Oh, absolutely. And with a hand like this, they're both pretty much spells because of the way Otawara works. So they're 2 bounce spells. You might as well take advantage of them.
And we have here a very typical start for both decks, with the Esper deck going with Danik, and we see that Jzjaws with the Harvester, and now a follow-up by Temur for Life of maybe a Wedding Announcement coming in the way. And we know this card it's really good against Rakdos, right? Arya, what do you think?
Yeah, Wedding Announcement, particularly on the play, definitely really powerful too. The way the two decks work is Esper is all threats to take over the game, and Rakdos is all 2-for-1s and card advantage. So Wedding Announcement, which provides 2, 3, 4 cards of value for 3 mana, is really hard for the Rakdos decks to beat.
And I really like here the Temur play of not blocking the Harvester with the Nick, knowing that that can be a follow-up of Trespasser to exile it from the grave, and that exactly happened. But now this Airtry can be a very good tool, right? And why do you think this Esper deck plays these exact cards, Sky?
Well, Urtai is also very flexible, right? So the more things a card can do, the more likely it is to be able to adapt to any given situation. So for example, here, we have Urtai being able to destroy something. Granted, it is replaced with a card, but it did get the job done right when it needs to here, so then it can go down the middle.
Yeah, and definitely now being giving Temur the opportunity to attack there for 3 damage, gain some life, and being able to draw a card from Wedding Announcement. Because a lot of times we think of Wedding Announcement as making a bunch of 1/1s, but it also has this ability and flexibility that if you attack with 2 creatures to draw you a card.
Yeah,
And
and this is exactly what the Espedex wants to be doing in this matchup. Once you're getting cards, the Espedex cards are much better at taking over the game when you're ahead than the Rakdos decks are. Things like Talia, Rafine, Announcement are all very hard to play against when you're behind, because for the large part, they're either good at or about attacking.
Completely agree. And here we see that Temur draws Rafin, and that might be the perfect card to be drawn because now you're able to connive a lot. Sky, what do you think Temur might be looking here to draw, or even being able to finish this match? Because now it's the opportunity to get that advantage.
I'm thinking anything that either generates card advantage or expands the field at this point. So I think it is more a key of getting those lands out of the hand, or in this case, getting a goblin shaman token off the field. But yeah, absolutely. We are looking for either some sort of card advantage or field advantage here. Field advantage to push Rafine's agenda, card advantage to make up for the fact that there's only one card left in Timur's hand currently.
And that cut down trying to do some work, but in response, Temur used both auto auras. One of the Temur, it was used for the token of the Fable, and the other auto aura used on the own Danik. And what do you think of this play area of auto auring your own creature?
Definitely a really heads up play here, particularly given that now that Denix in hand, it can be played out as another creature, or with that Rafine, you can even discard the Denic to both get counters and put a creature in your graveyard, and put the creature in your graveyard for you to get back, since Denic can flash back from your graveyard. And so Otawara really, like you said right at the start of the game, turning out to be more of a spell than a card because it definitely got at least a full card's value for just one mana.
Oh, and as you are giving this amazing explanation that makes completely sense, we see a Shieldred, and this card might be now punishing a bit Temur because now when they try to attack and connive, that Shieldred is going to trigger and it's going to start dealing damage fast. And we see that Temur already at 13 life. Uh, Never mind.
Yeah, though you will see, you didn't, you were asking at the beginning of the match the advantage of Rakdos, and what the advantage of a two-color deck is you get to play a fairly straightforward mana base, whereas Team for Life with their three-color mana base, they've taken so much damage off those pain lands, so they found an answer to this Shieldred, but if there's another Shieldred coming, that could be a problem just because of how much they've taken off those Caves of Coilers.
Oh yeah, for sure. And the damage adding up. One way you have to gain life in Esper is, for example, your Danik when it's face up. But not a lot of other ways to gain life here with this deck. And Sky, what do you think Jzjaws is looking for now after? Because Temur for life just build all this board, and what is the out here for Jzjaws?
Well, that's one of the outs, right? Children. I mean, Tamer's going to be drawing. They are going to be drawing a ton of cards here. Children is one way to say, okay, you want to get this card advantage, fine, but now you have to deal with me first. Another thing that might be really well is something that can be used to duplicate with Kiki Jiki, right? Anything that can be used for a card advantage or a board advantage here involving Reflection and Kiki Jiki. Considering that there's nothing to deal with here, we'll see what happens off the Rafine, but with every single draw that happens, Shieldred continues to ping. Hence why that was such a significant draw for Jzjaws.
And that makes a lot of sense. And as you said, we see them were down to 7, and Jzjaws gaining life each turn. At the speed that they are gaining life, they actually might win just because of Shieldred.
Yeah, those caves of Carlos really hurting, and another way they're hurting is we saw last turn we didn't see that Plaza of Heroes get left up because Team of Life had to tap white mana, tap it for white mana to not take damage, and even on future turns they're kind of restricted, even if they manage to stick the shield right on what they can actually do because of that,
And
because
it
of the
looks
amount of damage they've taken.
and Arya, I think you're the perfect person to explain us the Apnak rule. I think it's how you say it. Maybe I'm saying it completely wrong. When you have the two Shieldreds, the way that they resolve and which one resolves first. Because we saw some people actually losing games in standard because of the way the triggers are positioned.
Sure. So essentially, the short version is whoever's turn it is, their shieldred resolves last. So if it's your turn, yours goes on the stack first, so your burns resolves first.
And here we have game one for Temur Esper. And we have a look here at the sideboard from the Esper Legends side. And Sky, what do you think Temur is going to look here in the sideboard?
Well, already some fantastic choices being made here. So, how did Timur win? Through Ao the Dawn, or through flying. So, Ao the Dawn Sky is going to now enter the deck, another flying threat. There is also Loran of the Third Path that can deal with Fable of the Mirror Breaker, because let's say that there was even a little bit more life there last game. If that Fable of the Mirrorbreaker gets out of control, that's game over, regardless of the life total. So these are some things to kind of mitigate that situation there. And Loran just again creates card advantage. If Shieldred is on the field, it can create a win condition. So I very much like the sideboard here that I keep wanting to say Timur has chosen here.
And Arya, on the other side, we didn't see what JG Jaws got to sideboard, but what do you think Rakdos is usually looking for in this matchup?
I think Rakdos' game plan post board is very similar to game one, where you just want to interact as much as possible. So you just want efficient interaction for creatures. So the way the Rakdos deck is built is every card in the deck, or almost every card in the deck, is a 2-for-1, and you just want to interact with every threat coming out of Esper. So that's exactly why we saw things like Shieldred coming out, because it's 4 mana and trades badly on mana with the Rakdos interaction, and why we saw Ao the Dawn Sky coming in, because Ao trades very well with interaction. You get a free trigger off it.
That's true. AO really resistant to removal, and we know that Rakdos is full of removal. And we have here the game 2 started. We already have an Harvester, Rafine. I saw that Jay-Z used the cut down, but actually cut down also pretty good against Rafine, right? Because it works on Rafine before it connives.
Yeah, cut down definitely a good piece of interaction for Rafine specifically. With 4 toughness in Ward 1, cut down is one of the few things that actually trades up on mana with Rafine, and you spend less mana on the cut down than they do on the Rafine.
Oh, and we have a Shieldred, very fast turn 4, but go for the throat, premium removal. And Sky, what do you think of Talia here? We see Talia being drawn by Timur, and this is actually one of the cards that never changes in this Esper deck.
So normally Thalia would be a decent draw here, but the problem is that the Harvester can just pick it off depending on what is in Jzjaws' hand here. So perhaps not the best draw. However, there are still a pair of Go for the Throats in hand, which again, if we see the Shieldred is going to be pretty much a non-issue here, barring anything ridiculous here. So far, the Thalia will be used to eat the Harvester here most likely, and then that wedding announcement can start generating card advantage again, as Arya was talking about earlier.
Oh, and we see here actually this Archfiend, this card has been playing a lot in sideboard of Rakdos. And Sky, how do you feel about this card particularly?
So I'll have to say, and in first impression, any card that says you lose the game at it makes me feel nervous. However, most of the time, you don't get a chance to see that you lose the game thing. It's either going to get destroyed by something like Go for the Throat, or you're going to win the game with it. So I still have mixed feelings about it, but in a sideboard situation like this, I think it's a fine choice.
And we see here Shieldred, and we saw that Timur already used all the removal, so that can be a tricky situation there. And what do you think of this board state, Arya?
So I think it's a particularly tricky situation because there's 2 Go for the Throats used. There's also a third one discarded. So now all Tima has left in their entire deck is 2 copies of Ertai and 1 more Go for the Throat, and aside from that, they can't deal with Shieldred. And their deck just draws too many cards to actually win without dealing with the Shieldred. So they're in a pretty rough spot.
Definitely, and that cut down, not able to take down Rafine anymore, and especially even we see Timur considering this spell pierce on the token. And why do you think this spell pierce was used, Sky? Maybe because the Shieldred clock is really high and you want to really try to get the board as full as possible?
Yeah, you want to survive as long as possible here. Arya was already talking about how there's very few things considering the first few turns on the cards that have already been used and or discarded here. So yeah, preservation is quite important here. And Shieldred is, if you don't deal with me right away, that's it, the game's over, as depicted here.
Yeah, and we going for a game 3. That Geeks command also coming very in handy there for Jay-Z. And Arya, now on your perspective, do you think something is going to change on the sideboard between games 2 and 3?
Yeah, so we're seeing Team of a Life bringing in Shield Reds and the Skrelv, and the reason for the both of those is actually quite connected. Skrelv was much better on the play than on the draw. If you're getting Skrelv down turn 1, then it's a lot more impactful. It can throw off Rakdos' whole game, and Shield Red in turn is much better when you have Skrelv in your deck. Once you have Skrelv in your deck, your Shield Reds are more likely to survive, and on the play, you're applying more pressure. So those few points of life drain that the children does before it gets killed, that's much, much more valuable on the play.
And we see here an Otawara, and I just love how these lands are so versatile. You can play them untapped, so basically there's no cost on playing them over a basic, because there's not really like a fetch or anything in this format. And what do you think of this start, Sky, for the Teamer deck?
Well,
Teamer for
first
life deck, not Teamer deck.
I'm glad you had mentioned something about the land base because this is big, right? Think about how much life would have already been used to cast these spells. And that one adds up fairly quickly here, especially during a game where we have to worry about Shieldred for drawing here. So there is that. Second off, I think this is a pretty strong start. You know, we say that before you asked me, now we had Fable the Mirror Breaker down. Now it's a little trickier, but still, this hand seems like a particularly decent situation. There's a lot of versatility here, as we've been talking about the whole time for Esper Legends, and there's going to be some conniving going on here, which can help manipulate the hand out of bad situations.
And Ariel, what do you think of these particular matchup later on? Because I know that, for example, cards like Plaza of Heroes, at first they don't look like much except fixing your mana base, but they can become really relevant later on, right?
Yeah, very much so. That's one of the things that makes Esper Legend so strong is you effectively get to run 45 spells with Plazas and Ottawaras and Iganjas and Takanumas. It's definitely one of the few things that gives Esper Legends a fighting chance in this matchup because the Rakdos deck really all about one for oneing, very well set up to play against Esper. So it's really only because of those things that we see Esper still in it.
And this card, Vampire's Vantage, I haven't seen it play at all. Sky, what are your thoughts on this particular card?
I mean, it deals with Talia, certainly, as we just saw on the surface level, but honestly, Esper Legends in general relies upon having a pretty big board state. So I definitely see the justification for having that in. As you can see, if Rafine is just swinging on its own, there's not much to it, right? But if there's a huge field, then that's cause for concern because again, you're conniving that many cards. So just kind of something to think about. I like the vengeance in here.
And I really like this Teamer play here of using the mana from a Ganjo, but since it's a legendary, when you cast your second Ganjo, it disappears, but you get your mana and you're able to cast AO. And what do you think now here, Arya? Jay-Z really needs to deal with this board state.
Yeah, that's I really like the heads up play of recognizing from Team of a Life that it's not about the amount of lands they have in play. It's all about just applying as much pressure as possible. The Rakdos deck does have a lot of a lot of inevitability, but these flyers out of the Esper deck are particularly hard for the Rakdos deck to beat and answer. So getting them down as quick as possible seems really strong for Team of a Life in this spot.
I completely agree, and I have to say I'm impressed by the quality of both players, making amazing plays throughout, playing so tightly throughout all these games, and we have had so many interesting games because of that. And Sky, what do you think? I know you like AO. We were talking about it in the sideboard, but how do you think this card plays here an important role against Jay-Z. I think we cannot hear you, or maybe it's just me.
Oh, no, 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 I got it. So Arya was talking earlier about how it does generate card advantage because you need a card to deal with it, and then it emerges another card from it. In this case, we have Talia. I was just thinking about it as a flyer. So that was a really great insight by Arya talking about there's multiple layers to AO on top of it being just a threat as a creature. So yeah, fantastic damage here it's been dealing so far. It's gone now, but there is a Thalia in its place now.
And Arya, I have a question for you. It's not exactly about the particular situation of the match, but you have won the VML, right? I think more than one time even. You've
Yeah,
made
thrice.
Yeah, you've made top eight multiple times. And how are these players feeling right now? Like, what is it like to be on the contest, like on a top eight to win of the VML?
So it's a really interesting spot because it's kind of in the middle of two things. Um, on one hand, a lot of the highest stakes things have already happened. There, these players are already in top eight. They've already qualified for the regional championship. They've already qualified for the VML championship, which we haven't talked about very much. But that's a 24-player event with two PT invites, 10 regional championship invites. So just like this fantastically high stakes event. So in many ways, they've already made it. But there's a non-trivial amount of money on the line, and there's just a lot to be said for winning a tournament. So it's really harrowing. I know I've been in these spots before and been like, oh, I'm completely out of this, but I'm gonna keep fighting because even the smallest chance means I should keep playing and trying to win. And that's, I think, what really defines these tournaments.
And I
These
see so many great players in the tournament. We have, for example, Skyler Warfield. They are Pro Tour top four. Amazing players we see here, for example, and making it in the top eight as well here of the VML. Um, so we see definitely a lot of amazing players, and also names that we didn't know. Like for example, you Arya. I knew you from the VML. So definitely bringing a lot of new players here. And Skylar, what do you think of this board state that definitely has been evolving here, and these harvesters doing some work?
So this board state would frighten me, facing because we're in the perspective of teamer, facing a Kiki Jiki with a Blood Tide Harvester on board is terrifying. There is still so much that can happen here on both sides of it, but just that is a pretty hefty field right now for Rakdos midrange. It's only missing the Shieldred at this point.
Yeah, the game looks very in a good spot for Jay-Z as they have been able to establish this board. And do you think, Arya, there's any coming back from this from Timor side?
there's definitely some chance, but they need to specifically draw removal for that to be able to happen. Without that, this Fable's just going to take over the game. And like Skybilz got right at the start of this match, the Fable's kind of the be all and end all of this matchup for Rakdos. Unless there's an answer to Fable, it's really, really hard for Esper to win because that card takes over the game like no other.
And we see here Timor considering the options either between wedding announcement or Rafine. But I guess wedding announcement allows you to then set up for a better Rafine next turn, right, Sky?
Yes, so it does set up for a better Rafine with the tokens, but at this point, there's also a card drawn here. So I believe Go for the Throat was the intended card to be looked for here to maybe grab the Kiki Jiki in this case. But this is a really difficult position for both players right now. Jzjaws being down to 4, and in this case, Tamer being down to 2 creatures on the board. It's really going to be difficult to see who wins. It's anybody's game right now.
I completely agree with you, Sky, on the intended goal of playing wedding announcement, recognizing that in this spot, if that Fable sticks around, this game's over. And that wedding announcement play, it's unconventional. It might not, when with the opponent at 5 life, it might not immediately click why you need to get something down, get an enchantment down rather than a creature and applying pressure. But in this spot, getting cards, finding an answer for Fable, starting to recoup the 4 or 5 cards Fable has already put you behind is really, really important.
Yeah, and I want to point out there as that was going on too, duplicating the trespasser there to gain even more life in this very difficult situation. That was a great play there by Jzjaws.
And Trespasser is one of those cards that you get access to play if you're playing Rakdos, but usually Grixis players have Corpse Appraiser instead as another 3 drop. Um, but actually, Graveyard Trespasser is better in some of the matchups because of this draining aspect and the transformation aspect. What do you think of this card, Arya?
Yeah, I think Trespasser is definitely much better than Corpse Appraiser in a spot like this. When you're on the back foot taking a lot of damage, Corpse Appraiser draws cards, which, I mean, who doesn't love drawing cards? But Graveyard Trespasser gaining life, stabilizing, and applying pressure, really important when you're up against a deck like Esper, where your life total is the main axis of looking to win, rather than grinding you out over a long game.
And this game is so close. Look at those life totals.
Yeah, it's definitely close. It's going to be a really tough spot for Timo for Life though. They need to win really they need to find an answer right now, otherwise next turn the Fable just wins the game. There's not really two ways about it.
The good thing is that there's no shield red on the board, so that means that we can try to draw some cards. But go for throat here, another great card. And Sky, why do you think people are playing Go for Throat instead of the Infernal Grasp?
Infernal Grass does involve the payment of 2 life, and we're not really seeing a lot of artifact creatures around right now, right? There are certainly some artifact creature threats right now, but that's kind of a matter of reading the meta and noticing that there is that absence of artifact creatures from here. So why pay the 2 life unless you absolutely have to?
And definitely the 2 life over and over again, it's becoming relevant in this particular matchup as we see that Timur is at 4 life. So maybe if those Go for Throat were Infernal Grasp, the story had been very different. So very nice choice here by both players. Uh,
This is a
uh,
tough spot, by the way, because there's 2 ways Jzjaws can handle this. You can play for field or you can play for life. If you're playing for life, the trespasser gets duplicated and you try to do that way. However, in this situation, it looks like Jzjaws is going to play for board position here via the harvester. It's a very difficult decision to make given how tight this game is right now.
Yeah. The neat thing about this line is that this way, with the Denic going down, there's no real way for Team of a Life to gain, well, life. They're stuck at that titular for life. And over time, over the next few turns, copying this Graveyard Trespasser is just going to win the game. So taking that Denic off the board, keeping Team of a Life constrained to the life they already have, and close to guaranteeing locking it up just over the next few turns with Graveyard Trespasser and Trespasser copies attacking and gaining life, leaves Jzjaws in a very good spot.
for sure, and it at a certain point, if it looks like Timur at the game, things change a lot in these mid-range matchups as we see here. And here, the Trespasser being able to deal with the Denic on the graveyard, and we see Timur down to 3, and this Shieldred. This might be game, right?
Well,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's hard to imagine beating a shield red in this spot. I don't think there were any draws in Team of a Life's deck that could have done that, because even if the shield red gets killed, the Graveyard Trespass is getting copied and attacking and looting and making Team of a Life lose life.
Great games here, and Jay-Z Jaws getting the first game up with Rakdos, and we see here the power of Rakdos and really showcase why a lot of our players in the top 8 decided to bring this deck. Sky, any words on this match that we just saw?
Remember when I said earlier this is an ideal board state? All it's missing is Shieldred? There it was. That's all you needed to close out the game there. Shieldred and Fable of the Mirrorbreaker, just partners in crime, just a very, very reckoning force. It's going to be a tough combination to defeat it, but as we were talking about before, this is a very talented pool of players and decks. I'm certain we'll probably see the defeat of that at some point. It wouldn't surprise me, at least.
What
Yeah,
about you, Arya?
Yeah, that was perhaps not an unsurprising result. Rakdos is very good at beating these creature decks head on, just in so many 2-for-1s that gather value over the course of the game. And well, Fable is very easily the most defining card of our standard, and it's really hard for most decks to keep up with that in a long game. So really strong, lots of heads up play from Team of a Life. We saw a lot of playing to their outs, trying to find the removal spells in the spots they needed it. But ultimately, Rakdos is just really strong in these matchups, and we saw Jzjaws pilot it almost completely without fault. I didn't catch a single misplay during that match, so a well-deserved win for them, I think.
Congrats to Jay-Z. He now advances to our semifinals, but we also have to congratulate not only Teamer for Life, but also the other players that end up losing here in the top 8, but they made it into the top 8, which I think it's a huge achievement. There were 128 people in the beginning of this season, and the top 8 got, as I mentioned, not only the cash prize, but the regional championship invite, which is the part to the Pro Tour, and also VML finals invite. And these VML finals, it's going to be a huge event, and actually attaches some Pro Tours invites. So definitely a great path for the Pro Tour. These finals will only have 24 players, which is the top 8 of our 3 season 10, 9, and 8. Definitely an event to look for. And we have here now laid out our top 4. We have Jennifer, Skyler, Warfield, Brittney, and Jay-Z that we just saw play. And we are actually going to watch these matches live. I think we can see the slides of the players that end up losing here on the quarterfinals. So first we have Talia, and she got this Azorius Temple deck. Sky, any words on this deck?
Azorius Tempo. I think Faye did a very good job of picking out this deck. I have seen Azorius Tempo in action. It just shuts down decks right away. So I very much approve of this. I love the Skrelv's Hive. I think that was a fantastic choice here. And don't cut out Azorius Tempo. I think we're going to be seeing this deck for a while.
Arya, you also a bit upset we are not going to be able to see this particular deck live?
I am. This is such a sweet brew, and we've seen Talia absolutely crushing with this through the VML season. She went 7-0 in during the Swiss. Faye won all her matches through the elimination rounds as well. Several with the stack, I believe, on coverage last week as well. So I really wish we got to see it on coverage, but I'm really glad she got here with this deck, making it to at least the regional championship, the VML championship. I'm sure we'll see a lot more of her going forward.
I completely agree, and I think Talia here, she got an amazing deck and she made the top 8. So we are showing this slide because unfortunately we don't have a chance to watch Faye play here on the stream, but we want to take the time to congratulate the players that made top 8. That's a huge achievement, and we really want to congratulate these players for an amazing season 9 here of the VML. And next up, who do we have that made into our top 8? So we have Duen, and actually they were the ones that eliminated me on the top 16. Amazing player, I have to say, showcasing a lot of great skill. And here choosing on the top 8 to bring this Jeskai control once again. Sorry we didn't get to see this deck because it's actually pretty sweet. What do you think of this Jeskai control, Sky?
Well, first of all, I want to say, you know, with me, that's a very loaded question for me. In terms of though what the deck presents, it does have Fable the Mirrorbreaker again. You cannot go wrong with that card. We do see Jace the Perfected Mind. We were talking about this in the pre-show. I talked about it with Arya, like, where's mono white? And Arya was talking about, well, think about how there's not a ton of win conditions for mono white, and Jace the Perfected Mind can just like come out of the sideboard and just take out that deck. So I just love all of the answers that this provides. Also, a Reckoner Bankbuster, a card I'm surprised we didn't really see a lot in the match we just watched. Another card that's just absolutely wrecking things. And then, of course, Wandering Emperor, one of my favorite planeswalkers. Can't go wrong with it. What do you think about this deck, Arya, and where it's seated in Standard currently?
I think it's a pretty good meta call. I mean, like you said, Reckoner, Bankbuster, Fable of the Mirror Breaker are just really strong cards. It's hard to go wrong with them. And I mean, Duen, they've done well this season. Pretty strong meta call, I think, to bring Jeskai Control. It's one of those decks that it may not have the same evenness of spread a deck like Grixis has. It might not be very good against every deck, but the decks it's good against, the decks it's built to beat, it really beats up on. So definitely a strong choice. Wish we'd gotten to see it on coverage because it's also a very sweet deck.
But nonetheless, congrats to Duen on making it to the top 8, and I'm sure we'll hear much more about the year on the VML since it made the top 8. So we will see on the VML Championship Finals later on this year. And what other player made top 8 here that we are not going to see? Tania. Okay, that's great. I've played against Tania a few times. She's lovely, and here she decided to bring Esper Midrange, which looks like Esper Legends. And Sky, what are your thoughts here on this deck? I think we cannot hear you.
This is very similar to the one we saw as for Legends. We do see, though, a Liliana of the Veil here in the sideboard. Very powerful card. And you would think to yourself, well, Lily of the Veil, that wrecked the Standard where it took place in Innistrad, the original Innistrad. But there's just so many good cards like Fable and Shieldred nowadays. We don't get a chance to see Lily of the Veil as much anymore. We also have the Hearse as a card, and then a card that we saw once in the last match, Giggs's Command, another one that's just an all-around solid sideboard for any deck running black here. So I think this is another one that you just can't go wrong with here. And then, of course, one last thing I want to know, it's that I think it's a one of up there. I'm looking, the Giggs, the actual creature. That one can also be a mirror breaker, either against another Esper midrange or against Esper Legends also.
And I want to point out something. I see here that Tania wrote that winning the VML would mean a lot today because Caroline and Arya are two friends and teammates that each have won the VML twice. So unfortunately, Tania not being able to do this season, but 7-0 in the playoffs. That's very, very good. And also making it in the top 8. Arya, what do you think of this deck and Tanya overall here? Since it looks like she's your friend.
I'm a huge fan of Tania. She's one of the strongest Magic players I know, even though she did get it wrong because Caroline and I have actually both won the VML thrice. Well, 3 times proper for her, one shot and 2 seasons for me. But despite that slight, big fan of Tania. Shame we didn't get to see this deck in top 4, but I will note we've talked a lot about meta calls in terms of, the decks you're expecting. Another really smart decision we're seeing here is Tania, she was seed 3 coming into this. She was the highest seed of anyone other than Talia, and she'd gone 7-0 in the Swiss. And Esper Legends is a deck that's really, really strong on the play. So really smart use of the VML seeding and her spot in the standings to recognize, oh, she's going to be on the play most of the time in the top 8. So it makes a lot of sense to bring a deck like this that's much better on the play than on the draw. And a real shame it didn't work out for her, but a really heads up call from her.
Yeah, and that was a great call and great insight, Arya, because that's something that usually we don't notice, but that is a great insightful. And I'm also really sad that we cannot see all the top 8, but very happy for Tanya and congratulations on making top 8 and qualifying for these amazing tournaments. So we have two live matches of the semifinals and still a final to go. So let's go here and see our semifinals. We have Jen Crotts, and she is playing as per Legends that we just saw here. And Sky, what do you think of this deck?
Oh, I love it. I love the Razor Lash in there. There's one copy in the main. It looks like there's two in the sideboard. We have Lockdown, okay? As someone who is completely lost to that card, going all in on aggro, yes, absolutely include a copy of that in your Esper decks for sure. We have Gix again, big fan of that card, and just looks like a solid deck all around again. It's not quite the same as for Legends deck that we saw before, but there's a ton of things here that can generate that card advantage that Arya was talking about earlier. Namely, the Kaido in the sideboard also could provide a terrific mirror breaker. How about you, Arya? Anything here that sticks out to you?
Yeah, I agree on the calls on Gix and Kaito. The way the Esper deck wins, unlike Grixis or Rakdos, which have a bunch of 2-for-1s, is Esper has a lot of threats that individually threaten to take over the game, and leaning into that with Gix and Kaito is a really strong plan. I really like it as one of the ways to combat these 2-for-1s that Grixis has, because if you're drawing like 3, 4, 5 cards with Gix, Kaito, those sort of things, there's really no way that Rakdos can keep up with that level of interaction. And also, those cards all better on the play. And Jen, she's the highest seed left, so she's going to be on the play in every single match she plays from here.
And who is Jen playing against? Let's see here our other player slide. And we have Skyler Warfield, and we've talked about them a bit here today. And they decided to bring Rakdos Sacrifice. How do you feel about this choice, Arya, of Rakdos Sacrifice in this tournament? And also, what do you think of this particular build?
Well, Rakdos Sacrifice, a deck that's fallen out a bit, a little weak against cards like Brotherhood's End. The thing is, we're not seeing a lot of cards like that anymore. A lot of the things that made Rakdos mid-range, Grixis mid-range strong against the Sacrifice decks, people have stopped putting those cards in their sideboard as much because we haven't been seeing so many Rakdos Sacrifice decks, so it leaves it really, really well positioned for a comeback. And we see Skyler registering it here for this top 8, where they're up against a bunch of Rakdos mid-range. So I think it's a really smart heads-up call from them. It's really well positioned to take advantage of what we're looking at in this top 8.
And what is your thoughts, Sky, on this deck?
Oh, I always am a big proponent of Rakdos Sacrifice here. The anvil alone is just really difficult to deal with, right? You're gaining a ton of life. That's not something that you see quite a bit as much as we used to anymore. You're seeing a lot of card advantage with the Fable, the Mirror Breaker, the Mishra's Research Desk. And then I also, oh my goodness, is that copies of Ob Nixilis in there? Yeah, I'm a big fan of Ob Nixilis. I feel like it's a card that's been very underplayed in the current standard. I can't wait to see how it operates against the current meta. Also, too, I want to make a note. We were talking about this in the pre-show as well. Skylar makes a note here. They make a note here about being, maybe that means I'm not so washed after all. I never thought Skylar, they were washed up at all. I mean, we have what, a top 4 performance at a players tour. We have rivals, MTG rivals. Skylar is one of the fiercest competitors out there. So I just want to say, Skylar, you are not washed. And I'm really, really interested to see not only how the deck performs, but how you do in this top 4.
And I actually have seen a bit of Skylar's stream testing here for the VML. And I have to say, they play very well and they are great at analyzing the metagame and changing decks each week. So I have to say, if we are going to see great magic, both Jen and Skylar, amazing players. I'm really excited. So let's see if our players are ready because this is a live match. It looks like we are.
I'm so excited.
And I think this is exactly the sort of thing Espo wants to see game 1 against Rakdos. Talked about those threats that take over the game. Well, there's a Rafine, there's a Gix in the opening hand, there's a 2-drop to play before them. So Skylar is going to have their back to the wall for starting probably from turn 2 or 3.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with Arya here. I mean, you get the turn two Denick, the turn three Rafine. That's very, very much starting on the correct foot here from the stance of Esper as well. And if that wasn't enough, we even have a follow up of removal. We have Algonjo and we have Go for the Throat here.
Yeah, we definitely have great ends, even on both sides. One thing that I really like is, for example, the way that this card that a Sky just play works really well with the Obnixilis casualty, because you eventually can get it back, and also works really well against Esper, because usually Esper plays a lot of non-basic lands, which allows you to cast this card from the grave for very cheap. And here, what do you think of Jen's decision to put the counter on Danik that then enabled Sky to be able to deal with Rafine with cut down?
I think
Arya.
it's a really smart heads up play from Jen in this spot. She recognized that Denick is going to take over the game. It's going to gain a bunch of life. It's impossible to race for this Razor Small Grid, which notably cannot block. And so getting a 3-4, getting something out of cut down range, very, very valuable, and close to guarantees her a hit with the Gix this turn, which she then got and has now gained her a bunch of life and a card.
And here we see the card that everyone talks about, this Onicult Anvil. How do you feel about this card, Sky, in this particular matchup?
Well, when it comes to going against Esper, you really need to generate as much value as possible. And the Anvil does generate quite a big board presence here that would give something that typically can also go wide Esper a run for its money. It's not going to be a guaranteed board advantage every single time. So, again, that Anvil is going to be there not only to create board presence there, but also to kind of turn the tide on life a little bit at a time. And that does add up fairly quickly.
Yeah, and it does prevent the life gain because you can block the Danik and sacrifice it here. And what do you think of this play, Arya, to being able to at least stop Jen to gaining so much life?
I think it's necessary for Skyler in this spot. They kind of needed to stem the bleeding a little bit. But that said, there's not really good options for them. Oni Anvil generally good against decks like this, generally good at blocking creatures and slowly taking over the game. A lot less good against cards like Gix and Kaito, which Jen has put in her deck, because those cards, those take over a game in a way that only Cult Anvil cannot keep up with, and really go over the top of that strategy.
And Sky, what do you think of this Arbringer here? This card, I don't see it play much in Esper Legends, right? But it looks like it's getting more popular.
Yeah, typically we see that in Azorius aggro, of all things. You know, you build the big field of soldiers and you just kind of rush in. I like it here though because it creates a pretty early threat in the air if you need it to do so. It kind of creates a more aggressive stance towards this. So yeah, Harbin's great here. But I'm wondering how it's going to stand up against Obnixilis, as Sky has just played it with a copy. They are looking to also create some board advantage of their own with the use of these planeswalkers.
And as we said, now maybe eventually when there's more mana available, this creature will be back from the grave, and it's a great way to use casualty from Obnixilis. Arya, do you think Obnixilis is enough to prevent the advantage that Jen was able to establish so far?
I don't think it will be. Obnixilis is much better offensively than defensively. It has very limited ability to actually affect the board. The -2 is, well, expensive in terms of loyalty, and the +1 doesn't help very much when you're behind. And so I feel like Obnixilis, strong card, not very good against Esper, a deck that's almost always on the front foot and applying pressure, and really very much for other matchups where decks like Mono White, like Grixis, like Rakdos are much slower to actually end the game.
So do you think you will see this card out after sideboarding for sure?
Uh, I I would imagine so. There's a lot of cards in Skyler's deck that they really wouldn't rather have for both sideboard matches. So I wouldn't be shocked if there were other cards that also really needed to come out. But that said, Obnixilis is definitely a priority to take out of the deck.
Yeah, and here Jennifer recognizing it and taking care of at least one of the Obnixilis. And we have children entering the battlefield. And as of right now, Sky doesn't really have an answer for it.
Yeah,
Sky, what
definitely
do
a rough spot for Sky because these Rakdos decks, these sacrifice decks specifically, are a lot less good at playing from behind than Rakdos mid range or Grixis mid range because your cards like Oni Cult Anvil and Mishra's Rishas Chest are much better at getting incremental advantage than they are at actually dealing with threats that are taking over the game.
Yeah, we were talking about this earlier. If Shieldred is not dealt with immediately, it spirals out of control fairly quickly. And the issue with this, as Arya was talking about, is that this deck needs to be able to draw cards. It needs to be able to get card advantage, and if it's not ahead right away and now Shieldred's out, suddenly you're just losing life hand over fist just because Shieldred is just that powerful.
And we have here Tekanuma reduced costs by a lot because of all the legends in play. And we see that Shieldred already starting to gain Gen some life. And we now have a magical number, which is 5 creatures on the board. And that our bringer is going to get scary very fast, right?
Yeah, though I don't even know that it's going to have time to get scary because Skylar, they're just so far behind here and they're taking a lot of damage this turn. The Rafine can put a bunch of counters on the Harbin, so I imagine that that's the end of the game. I don't think there's actually a way for Sky to come back from this position. Unfortunately, I don't think that deck really has outs over here.
And it looks like you are most likely right. Look at all these value that Rafine was able to get from the connive triggers, all the counters that are going to be put in Rafine, and there's no way that Sky can block that flyer creature. So, and we all these children triggers gaining so much life, and here, Sky, what do you think we are going to see in sideboard from Sky side? Probably going on the play next because this game definitely not looking too good.
I think we're definitely going to see the Obnixilis come out, which, according to Chad, what is the plural of Obnixilis? Not sure. But yeah, we're going to definitely see the Obnixilis definitely get removed because it's not generating enough card advantage. It's good when you're ahead, but as stated earlier, Esper will get ahead very quickly, even if it is on the draw. So it's just something to keep an eye out for. That and also a game plan for maybe an extended game plan, I should say, for Shieldred. There might be something to deal with Shieldred right now within Skylar's deck, but there needs to be more of it because, again, it just cannot go unchecked.
And today is not only the finals of the VML here, but it's also actually pre-release day, which is always exciting. And here we have the win for Jen, and we are seeing the sideboard here. Uh, Arya, what do you think is going to make the cut here on this sideboard?
There's this is a really hard question because Jen has an abundance of excellent options here. I think almost all of the cards you could make a case for. Temporary lockdown, that's a slam dunk. That completely shuts down the Rakdos deck. Everything they have is mana value 2 or less, or at least everything, almost everything. And I wouldn't be surprised to see these Gix's commands maybe come in as well as a way of clearing off the board. Though maybe not because the Esper deck itself is not too short on small creatures. Uh, you definitely want to make sure you're able to still kill the shield rids that we'll later see Skylar bring in. So I'd expect some amount of answers to those staying in. But beyond that, honestly, there's a pretty good case for any of the cards. By and large, Jen's deck lines up pretty well against Skylar.
And Sky now as the play. So, Sky, how do you feel about that? And do you think it's going to make a difference here on what the strategy is going to be?
Yeah, absolutely. So you're kind of focusing on being a little more reactive as someone who's going second. So the Razor Lash comes out, one of the Skrull, actually, yeah, one of the Skrulls came out. So again, we're kind of focusing on the reaction here a little bit. If this were to go into game three, we definitely may see those more aggressive cards come back into the main board.
And we see here the opening side of for Jennifer and Arya. What do you think of this opener?
This opener's pretty strong. I think the most important thing here for Jen is she really wants to have something to play on turn two, and this hand has no dearth of that. So I think any hand with that, hard to mulligan.
On the other side, we see that Skyler does have a great start as well. Turn three Fable usually is pretty good. And what do you think, Sky, of Skylar's hand?
It's quite good. The only thing is that Jen did have the one answer to it, and that is Thalia. Thalia is supposed to delay those Fable of the Mirror Breakers there. So now, instead of having Fable be active now it's more of going to be a delayed turn. So there's going to be a cut down or go for the throat here instead.
And we see here the go for throat taking care of Talia, and that Lauren actually being used on the anvil, which means that the Fable actually does have a chance to stick on the board.
Yeah,
Do you think, Arya, that Fable might be enough to carry this game for Skylar?
I could definitely see it. I mean, Jen, she doesn't have a lot of what she wants to be doing going on. There's no Rafine, there's no kicks, there's nothing taking over the game. So there's really like slow, there's nothing but slow pressure. And Fable wins any long game. It outguards almost anything else in standard. So I like Sky's chances with them having two copies of it in this hand and the one answer in Loran already being uh, used.
And Sky, what do you think here of these two cards being discarded, or at least Sky considering ended up only going with Geeks and keeping the Invoke the Spare? Unfortunately, not drawing that land that was needed. What do you think of this board state for Sky?
Right now, other than the land situation, which can be remedied here, especially with treasure tokens here with the Goblin Shaman, I think that this is a pretty decent position to be in. Again, the lack of lands plus the Urtai and Jen's hand is going to complicate that. But you are, or I should say, they are setting up the Fable combo here, where if Kiki Jiki is not dealt with here, there's going to be some pretty big issues. And on top of that, there's going to be even more that's going to be rolling in between the Evoke and the Fable. There just needs to be more lands present on their field.
And Arya, I have a question for you. So, on Jen's perspective, we have here seeing that Sky missed land drop, right? If Sky does miss land drop again, do you think this Lauren is going to maybe stay quiet, not draw, or would you activate eventually this Lauren ability to draw cards to both you and your opponent?
I definitely think you want your opponent who's missing land drops to keep missing land drops, so probably best not to give them any additional draws. Of course, moot point here, seeing as Lauren got traded off.
And here we see the most scary thing someone can see in standard, a reflection of Kiki Jiki and another on the way. Do you think we might see here an infinite loop of reflection of Kiki Jikis, or not an infinite, but a lot of reflections being played, since Jennifer not really having a lot of answers right now? Sky?
Oh, definitely. That is the primary win condition here right now. I mean, the Invoke would help out, but given the Thalia situation, I think it's going to be absolutely, the go for the throat here for probably Thalia to get that in Vote Despair possibly online into multiple Kiki Jiki right now. And from there, it's just going to spiral. However, there are some ways in which Jen can counteract this right now, pardon the pun. There is the Urtai here on the field. The Gix can kind of help out with the card disadvantage here. So still pretty close game right now.
These
Yeah.
definitely could go either way, and I really like that the choice of Sky to keep that invoke despair might end up paying off, right? That initial maybe greedy to not go for the land and not discard more cards and keep that invoke despair might actually be good in the end. And Arya, why do you think Sky here decided to keep this invoke despair?
Well, I mean, at some point the Rakdos deck does need to win. It does need to take over. There's not a lot of options that Sky has, and invoke. It's a removal spell. It's 2 cards at this point. You need every bit of card advantage you can get. Also, something I'll note: you talked about the reflection of Kikijiki combination being something that really is scary for Jen. But given life totals here, I'd say it's Sky who needs to worry and be played a little safe with the reflections, maybe, because there's just too much damage coming across to realistically race by making 5 copies of Kikijiki for a turn. That's still a lot of you're taking 5 damage. That Denix gaining life, you're just falling further and further behind. Instead, what's scary about these reflection of Kikijikis in this spot, I think, is just a copy of Blood Tithe Harvester. If it comes down, that just ends the game on the spot. That just wipes Jen's board. So you need to respect that. Jen clearly respecting here. She's going to kill a reflection rather than countering invoke. And I think a testament to how much she really respects the reflection of Kikijiki in this spot and its ability to take over the game.
And I completely agree. That was definitely, we saw Jennifer for a long time. She was overing on the card, deciding where to use that. And I think a lot of people would just immediately counter the invoke despair, right, Sky? But here, Jen really thinking about. And what do you think of this decision of, as we say, prioritizing this reflection of Kikijiki?
I think that was a very difficult but respectful decision there. That is one of the toughest spots you can be in. You're giving your opponent card advantage at that point, but you have to respect what Kikijiki can do. So fantastic play there under pressure on behalf of Jen.
And it looks like it's maybe paying off because we see here Jen being able to negate that Lily, and now if Sky wants to use that removal on Rafine, it has to wait. They have to wait one more turn because of that ward, and ended up using it there on the other creature. And again, the Nick amazing advantage because it comes back from the grave. What do you think Arya Sky might need here to now close this game before Jen gets out of control?
I think it's the same answer it's been for the last few turns. Sky really, really needs to find a copy of Blood Tithe Harvester. Blood Tithe Harvester and Reflection of Kikijiki really take over the game, and without something to take over the game, well, Jen has almost lethal here. There's cards coming every turn between the Rafine and the Denic, so it's really 1 or 2 turns to find that interaction.
And here also, Jen will be able to draw a card from that clue. And I think Sky really needs these. Oh, but Liliana here enters. I didn't even think about it. And Sky, what do you think of this Liliana here?
Yeah, Skyler, they're definitely turning the corner here. They dealt with the threat with the cut down, then dealt with Rafine despite the ward with Liliana. They are turning a very pivotal corner in this game here. And Jen making the right decision here to take advantage of that clue. But suddenly, the advantage bar here, if there was one, would probably go to Skyler here because, again, they have control of the board right now, despite what the life total is.
And also the artifact on their side, it's going to allow to get some cards and maybe get that, for example, harvester that we need to start copying with the Kikijiki reflection. Oh, and we got a cut down, and cut down actually able to deal with Arya, with Rafine, not with you, Arya. But Arya, what do you think of these
Well,
here?
I mean,
And
the Plaza of Heroes means that the Rafine's safe for now, but it does the Cutdown does deal with the Plaza, which means one fewer thing to maybe protect the Rafine from removal for next turn.
And once again, we see here how powerful this plaza is, right? Because once again, we have it protecting the key card, and actually, these Rafin can get out of control fast. And Sky, they are at 4 life, and that can be a very fast way to go down if there's, for example, a shield red on Gen's side. On the other hand, here, uh, what do you think, Sky, that Jen is looking for with this Rafin conniving? What card would be necessary here?
Probably Shieldred. Shieldred or something to deal with the reflection. You can get rid of the reflection or just deal with the life via Shieldred. I would say right now, if I were in Jen's shoes, I would be looking for a Shieldred, just something to end the game before Skyler's deck spirals out of control. That's the advantage of Mishra's research desk, right? Like there's always something to do here. And speaking of respecting the Kiki Jiki, here comes Kiki Jiki's best friend here, Blood Tithe Harvester. Arya was talking about that. Need to find the Blood Tithe Harvester. Well, there it is.
And here we are going to see that Sky is going to be able to deal with this board, also using the minus ability of Liliana to make Jen have to sack that Rafin. And suddenly Jen again doesn't have board. And we have showcased how this Rakdos Sacrifice deck can control the board very well, because we saw Jen with more card advantage at one point, with more board presence, and Sky just able to turn this around. What do you think, Arya, of this particular build of Sky and how he's playing here against the Gen deck? And we are going to have a game 3, it looks like.
Yeah, I think post board this setup from Sky leaves them much better position than in game one. There's no Ob Nixiluses. Shield would provide an actual long game option that can keep up with Esper and punish all the cards Esper is drawing. And there's just like a bunch of interactive 2-for-1s. Liliana's generally getting 2 cards. Invoke Despair is always getting at least 2 cards. Mishra's Research Desk is actually getting at least 2 cards. So it's really turning into this version of Rakdos mid-range post-board in this matchup. It's just a matter of whether they can keep Jen from getting ahead on board early, because once Jen gets her wheels spinning, once her engines start going, there's not really that many come from behind mechanisms for Skyler.
And here we see both players taking their time to decide what to sideboard. This is a very important match, and we see here Jen even considering removal the air try on the play. Sky, do you think the strategy changes here a bit with Jen being on the play now?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, you want to make sure you start off on the right foot. You're getting those 2 drops down in time. You're possibly getting the Skrelv down on time. And I just want to say, I hand it to both these players. This is intense pressure. Both of these players are just keeping their composure, regardless of the board state, and just making every move count. So I want to compliment both of these players. What a fantastic match so far.
Yes, I would have lost by now for sure. I saw some plays by both of these players, just amazing, and it shows why they are advancing here into our finals almost. They just need 2 more games to win the VML, which is crazy to think about, and the pressure must be so big. And Arya, how do you keep when you are in this situation? How do you keep composure and make sure you're playing your best when there's so much pressure on the stake?
You just gotta at some level you just gotta ignore the pressure and play whatever you think is the best play each game. So right here, it's really, as we saw in this opening hand, it's really tempting for Jen to keep that opener. She had Rafine, Yogma, Gix, Shieldred, Aeo, all the really strong cards, but she made a really disciplined choice and recognized that if she keeps that hand, she doesn't have anything down on turn 2. And this hand definitely rewarded her for it, because if she waited till turn 3, played Rafine, gotten that cut down, she'd have been way behind in this game, instead of at least at parity, if not ahead right now.
And based on our openings here, we see that somehow Sky got a crazy card advantage here. And unfortunately, Jen not able to find that 4th land and not having the Rafine to be able to search for it. Sky, what do you think Jennifer is thinking now in this situation? How she can come back from this and make sure she can put pressure on Sky and not just lose on the spot with discard disadvantage and land disadvantage.
I think Jen, she's probably thinking of, all right, I need to stay disciplined, like you said. How do I keep big threats like Shieldred at bay here? How do I deal with Fable of the Mirror Breaker? And there's a card in Jen's hand to deal with each of those situations. We have Loran to deal with the Fable of the Mirror Breaker, and Go for the Throat to deal with Shieldred here. So you have the counters are present there. It's just a matter of what happens after both of those are gone. How does Jen stabilize from there, and what's the plan from there? There is, however, a Thalia that is protected by the Skreld, and that might be a pretty big factor within this game. I cannot wait to see how that situation unfolds.
Yeah, and this is one of the defining interactions of the standard here, really, and a defining interaction for this Esper deck for sure, where we see Skrelv play and a Go for the Throat in Sky's hand. And Sky can't target the Skrelv with Go for the Throat because it's not a fact. They can't target anything else with the Go for the Throat because the Skrelv saves it. So really not a spot you want to be in with your removal, with your one removal spell being shut off.
And here Jennifer has to think, oh no, I just found a way to deal with a Shieldred, and there's another one. And Sky decision, their decision to play here the Shieldred over the Fable ending up paying off because that Lauren now might be a bit too late. Arya, what do you think of this board state, and do you think there's a way Jen can come back from this?
Definitely. We've seen a lot of board states where Shieldred's just taken over the game, but notably in this spot, Jen's at 17 life. She can take damage from the Shieldred passive ability for a while. Neither of the creatures are really attacking very well into her board, so she has a little bit of time to find an answer to Shieldred. She does need to answer eventually, but I would not put her behind at all, even here, because she has the tools to come back. She has a bunch of card advantage tools. She just needs to find removal for the Shieldred. So, at least for now, I think she's good.
And Sky, how do you think this AO being able to maybe with the land coming down can change the game here? As Arya said, that is still very possible for Jen.
Well, it can help stabilize Jen in terms of card advantage. So the AO again would eat, well, possibly a removal spell. Maybe not so much here with Skrelv, but it would theoretically eat a removal spell and then do something once it leaves the board. So again, there's that need for stabilization here. We see Sky's hand right now. They have a Go for the Throat and a Takanuma. That Takanuma I'm seeing as another copy of Shieldred right here. A slower copy of Shieldred, but it is ever so present there. So that's just something to kind of think about and keep tabs on here as we progress here in game number 3.
And we see here Jen being aggressive, attacking with that flyer. And we see actually Shieldred also making an attack. And why do you think Jennifer's still trying, even though in a position a bit behind, still trying to get that advantage and trying to start attacking with the flyer? Do you think it's related with that AO also in hand, Arya?
That's definitely part of it, and part of it is the fact that in that spot, that Lauren is doing almost nothing. That Lauren is not protected. That Lauren is not really trading with much of Sky's board, and there's another Lauren hand that's going to come down eventually anyway. What getting that Lauren off the board does is it gives Jen a clue. She gets to draw off it, which is honestly the best she was gonna get, given it's legendary, and the board presence doesn't matter. And against Sky's deck, again, we talked about it a bunch, doesn't play very well from behind. So they need to keep at least board parity, and getting that damage in against them really, really important.
Completely agree. And we have the Shieldred that actually, Sky, you called it a couple times ago. You were like, that Takanuma is another Shieldred, and you were absolutely right. And I really like how Sky, they optimized the mana to be able to get it the Shieldred while the other Shieldred was in the board, getting a discount to Takanuma. And what do you think of this situation now? It looks like the tables have turned a bit, right?
Yeah, I mean, the big difference maker right here, if I'm looking at the board, is the Skrelv, right? The Skrelv is truly what's keeping Jen alive and in this right now, given that we know about the go for the throat here. However, this game is on a clock. Sky is currently ahead on the clock, and Shieldred is on the field. So it's like, it's difficult, right? But again, that Skrelv is present there. That is, says, Skrelv says, deal with me first, right?
And
So
here, Sky recognizing, okay, I know there's a Skrelv, but you have to pay 2 life if you want to protect your creature. And this is a race, and I need to kill some of your flyers. We know that AO brings things back, but this Venic doesn't. What did you thought of this play here by Sky, Arya?
I think it's a really smart heads up play. Any point later, the go for the throat is going to get absolutely nothing. Jen, she can pay mana with Skrelv and keep whatever Sky's targeting alive. At least in this spot for Sky, that go for the throat gained guaranteed making Jen lose at least 2 life. So really heads up play, recognizing this is the best spot to spend go for the throat.
And here we saw that Sky with another Shieldred in end decided to attack. AO blocked and Jen got Shieldred back. So now we have Shieldred, and it looks like now Jen has the advantage, right, Sky?
yeah, with that Harvin draw there, Jen can now start to make a little bit of a comeback, getting across the board for 3, given that that stays alive. And Skrelv will ensure that that stays alive. But even with that go for the throat draw here, just getting up in the air is one of the ways to beat any form of Rakdos here.
And somebody in chat is commenting, it's up nap time again. And there it is, the interaction we talked about before, and Arya so well explained to us on how these triggers of Shieldred resolve. Do you think we can here have a win by Apnap, Arya?
Well, I don't think there's going to be an AP NAP win that's going to happen here in this game at least, just because both players have high enough life. It only really matters if one player is going to 2 or 4 life or something like that. Some spot where uh, the order of which the shielded trigger resolves matters. Which, to go over again, the person whose turn it is, their shielded triggers always resolve last. But I don't think it's going to come down to that. So I think for better or for worse, AP and AP going to remain not super relevant here.
So we see here Sky using Invoke Despair, but we know that Jen, she's able to use that air try to counter that spell, give Sky a draw. And is that going to be it? Because now Jen will be able to attack with 5 creatures. And there's also a Rafine.
Yeah, the Rafine is huge here. Both of those draws were huge. That Urtai there may have been one of the determining factors. That was a very frightening draw there for Jen, but Jen happened to have the Urtai there right before. This has been a roller coaster of a game.
Definitely, and we are having some up nap time. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Like the times that I pronounce things wrongly, I'm so sorry. I will always excuse that I'm a foreigner.
Well, that's not it's a made up magic word, so you can pronounce it however you want, because what it really stands for is active player, non-active player, and what it means is the person whose turn it is, they're the active player, their stuff happens first. That's all it means. So don't be confused by the jargon.
I pronounce so many cards wrong, and I'm like, oh, it's because English is not my first language. And then somebody's like, oh, actually, the card origin is like German, Latin, and I'm like, okay, it's just me then. We see here, unfortunately, that things are not looking so great for Sky. Unfortunately, of course, for them, because on Gen Choose, I would be really happy right now. And Sky is there out here for Skyler.
Yeah, I'm thinking about the out right now here. So there is the research desk. And one of my favorite things about the research desk, especially in this deck, is it gets around Shieldred, right? You don't have to pay the Shieldred toll for that. So I always found that pretty interesting. Not like it would matter much here with the double Shieldred, but dang.
And we have here close games, very well played by both our players. And Jen, congratulations on making it into our finals. Also, congratulations to Sky to making it into the top four. That's a huge achievement, and I'm really excited to see both of these players in the VML finals because they will qualify for it, and also in their regional championships, which I think they are both in America, so maybe they will meet again. Sky, do you have some words on the match that we just saw?
That was solid play on both sides. I mean, again, just great decisions by both players. It was just a matter of one player drew a certain sequence of cards, the other player drew another sequence of cards, and just one happened to counteract the next, just depending on the turn order there. Just, again, solid all around play by both players, and just congrats on the top four. Just what an achievement. So, again, thank you to both players for a fantastic close game.
What about you, Arya? What did you think of this match?
Yeah, definitely a really close game. Very well played by both players. Really, the highlights of both these choices for top eight were the strengths of them were really highlighted. I mean, we talked a little about Skylar and their prolific list of Magic successes, but Jen is actually no different. She's been a real killer on the Canadian circuit, many tournament successes. So no surprise at all to see her in the VML finals. She's one of those players where if you told me a month ago that she'd be playing the finals, I wouldn't have batted an eye. I would have been like, of course she is. So well deserved win. Excited to see her in the finals, and great to see her crushing it.
Yeah, and I've seen Jen's name pop up on our coverage over and over again throughout different seasons. I think she has been able to have consistent results, and this might be the time that she takes that title. But before that, we do have another semifinal live before our finals. Can we take a look at our player slider and see who is going to play next? So first we have. Oh no, it's already the finals. I'm getting confused. We have Jzjaws that we saw here play. No, it's the semifinals, right?
It's the
Okay, I'm going
Yeah,
to
semifinals
yeah,
still.
that it's like
yeah.
5 a.m. here. Okay, so we already saw they play here, and we see here the Rakdos mid range. We've talked about this deck. We saw this deck. Why do you think Jay Z decided to bring this deck here to the VML area?
Rakdos is just a really solid choice. It's a very grindy, interactive deck. I mean, the players who've got here, they've got here by playing really well. They're very confident in their skill, and well deservedly, because I mean that's how they got here. And Rakdos is a deck that really rewards that. It's all about interaction, one for ones, two for ones, gaining that little edge. So it's a deck players can really leverage their skill with. So it makes sense to bring if you've gotten this far into the competition, and it's got a really solid matchup spread. It does really well against almost every creature deck. So it makes sense for it to be a pick into a top eight where you expect a lot of creature decks, which is what we saw.
And who are we going to see on the other side of the table against Jay Z that we already had a chance here to watch today and are going to watch again? Brittney. Okay. Brittney here. I know this name. Brittney is all over the VML. She has been doing amazing over a lot of seasons. I think last time she did like 7-0 in the playoffs in the past season. So really glad that she made it again here into the top eight. Great achievement. And Sky, what do you think of these Rakdos mid range again? Do you think this mirror is going to get interesting?
I think so, actually. I'm taking a look at the sideboard in particular. I see a Veraska in there, first of all. Like, there's some pretty interesting stuff in there. We have two of the, as I always call them, Grixis worms. So those are in there. And there's just a lot of unique choices that I typically do not see in a Rakdos midrange deck. And sometimes Mirror Breakers can make all the difference here. So I think this is going to be a pretty awesome matchup. What are the differences in both of these players 75, and will that play a role?
And
Yeah,
we are
I have
going
to
to
imagine
watch
they do.
that right now live. And I'm also excited to see this matchup and how it plays off. They are just getting things started, and I have to say something here because I've been playing the VML since season 3. Arya knows because we tested a bit back in the day. And I have to say, like, the VML you see a lot of the same players over and over again. They tend to return. And it's always nice to see in chat, for example, someone rooting for their friend. And we also see a lot of even friendship between people that we lost against. And then you're like, oh, I played against this person, but they are so nice. And we have to communicate way more than in other tournaments because we have to schedule our match. So we have to interact with the VML players much more than in any other tournament. And it's so nice to see that the community is so inclusive and it's so nice. And I'm really happy to be casting these events and really happy for what the VML has been achieving. And Sky, what do you think of here these matches that we saw so far, and how important it is to win the VML?
The VML, I'll say, is the most competitive league I've ever been a part of. League, tournament, circuit, anything. I mean, everybody, no matter what the records are or what stage you're in, everybody plays their hardest. Always. I've never seen anything otherwise. And it is just a tight knit community. And as you said, folks keep going and competing every time. And what it means to win that is you've won one of the most competitive tournament circuits in Magic right now. I mean, you can't even compare. And it's just something that I'm really proud to be a part of. And I'm glad that folks feel welcome and they have a place to call home within the Magic community.
Arya, you are two times VML champion. That's how I got to know you. But obviously, you since then achieved so many things in Magic. As we all know, you are such a well-known name of the community and also a big face of the VML for all that you've done for this project. And in your eyes, that you won the VML, what do you think it feels for one of these players to be able to win the VML?
It means a lot, I think, to win this tournament specifically. Like, sure, a lot of the invitations are with top eight, but winning the VML is, well, it's a title not very many people have, and it's as this guy said, it's an incredibly difficult tournament. I mean, I played I played the last six Pro Tours before I started working at Wizards, and of all the tournaments I had to win to get to qualify for the Pro Tour, the VML was by far the hardest. It had the highest level of play. People were really invested. People were working really hard. So winning this tournament, it's an accomplishment that means something. So I don't doubt that all the players who are still competing are really, really hungry for it.
And now, while our players getting ready, because I don't think they are quite ready, because we know this is a live match, so it takes some time to set up things. I want to know if you were here today playing the top eight, in this case, playing already the semifinals. Sky, what deck would you bring?
That is a really good question. I can't say the usual aggro just because Shieldred is such a wall here. And given what's been going on with Grixis and Mono White, those probably fall by the wayside too. I would probably just bring a variant of Rakdos mid-range right now. I would try to be probably a little cuter than I should with the sideboard, mind you, because I always tend to overthink and be cute with it. But yeah, most likely a form of Rakdos mid-range would be what I'd bring.
What about you, Arya? Anything different that our players didn't think of and that you would like to try here?
Oh, I absolutely know my answer, and it's not something any of the players brought. So, last weekend at the US Regional Championship, we saw the winner of the last season of the VML, Jason Yee. She brought a Blade of Shared Souls AO combo deck, and that's the deck I'd be bringing to this tournament. I'd be trying to bring some sort of weird off the walls combo deck because there's nothing I enjoy playing more. And that deck looked really strong and has been an absolute blast to play. I've gotten to play it a little bit on Magic Online, so I'd have loved to have played that for this weekend. And honestly, I'm even a little sad I didn't get to cover that deck this tournament because it's such a sweet deck to watch.
And yeah, as you said, Jason actually won our last VML, and I didn't know about this deck. Can you tell us about it and what score did he get? Because actually, it's the first time I'm hearing about it today when you told about it.
So Jason, she I believe went 5-3-1 with the deck. So she didn't make day two, and another version of the deck with Ray Zhang, they made top eight of the U.S. Regional Championship with it. So definitely doing really well. So the way the deck works is you take the card AO the Dawn Sky and you copy it as many times as you can with Blade of Shared Souls. You turn other creatures into copies of it, and that gives you debt triggers from AO, which lets you look at your top 7, put another creature into play, and then you equip Blade of Shared Souls to the new creature, and you get to go again. And then you eventually loop through your deck, get one of 3 or 4 different infinite combos that you can eventually get. And yeah, I mean, eventually win the game, I guess.
That's awesome. And I'm actually really excited because I live in the future from you because I'm in Europe. So right now it's 4:30 a.m. as I said here in the before, and I actually already played my March of the Machine pre-release. Any cards, Sky, that you think might impact standard? Any deck that you think that might come up with this? Because you also played the early access a bit.
Yeah, battles. Oh my goodness, I love battles so much. Invasion, I think it's of Asgol, which is an uncommon. I figured out a way to loop that in limited. Anybody knows me. I like to turn things sideways and keep it basic. I figured out a way to loop Invasion of Asgol yesterday, and I get the joy that Arya is talking about with creating combos. I had a little bit of a taste of that in limited. Completely on accident. So I'm looking forward to integrating battles into standard and making aggro relevant again. My goodness, it's been too long as someone who is a big proponent for aggro decks. So I'm hoping that battles can really, even if we have to wait for rotation, twist standard around, because there needs to be just a little bit more variety. We may have a variety of decks, but we don't have a variety of cards within decks right now. So battles in particular, look out for them. I think they're going to be really strong, and we are going to see much more complex gameplay between, do I go face or do I go battle? When do I hit the battle? When do I hit the face? There are just so many more game decisions here that battles are going to cause.
And actually, I know that Wizards designs the card some years in advance. So Battles is one of example of a well-designed card and such an awesome idea. I'm sure, Arya, we'll see in the future some amazing cards designed by you. I'm sure you'll design so many amazing cards that we've been talking about in the next 10 20 years, hopefully, until we are like old and playing Magic. Will ask you the same question I asked Sky. What do you think will impact standard in March of the Machine?
Unfortunately, that's not a question I think I'm really allowed to answer. I've already played with a lot of the cards since I'm working in play design and playing Magic from the future, so I can't really talk about what I think will impact standard, but I can say that there's a lot of sweet cards in there, and I'm really excited to see how some of them play out in the real world.
That's fair. You have the inside information, and it must be so sweet to work at Wizards and be able to have this opportunity. I'm sure you're going to do so many amazing cards that in some years you'll probably able to talk about with us. Is it like kind of, let's say, not weird, but as the sensation must feel a bit awkward because like you're designing this card and it's so cool, but you know you have to wait some years to be able to talk with everyone about it.
Yeah, definitely. Like, particularly in in my first few weeks, in my first month, I would help make a change to a card, and I'd be like, "Oh, this card is so sweet! Can't wait to tell everybody about it." And then I look at the release schedule and realize it's going to be well over a year before I can talk about it. So it's definitely it's hard to wait, but I'm sure it's worth it because it's an absolute blast working at Wizards and designing cards.
I'm so excited to see the cards that you design, and that in 1 year or something, you'll be able to start being like, "This card, it was my idea. I changed this card," and that will be giving some sweet stories. I don't know, Phoebe. Do we have any update on our players if they are ready to play or if they are having some technical issues to start the match?
Technical difficulties are still ongoing. We are working on resolving it. Nothing is on fire. Sit tight for just a few moments, please. Thank you. Please hold.
I don't know if people could hear you or not, but in case they can't, there are some technical difficulties. Nothing to worry about. Just wait a couple more minutes for our players to get ready. This happens a lot with live matches, and I don't know, but I actually cast some events, Paper Magic live in Europe, and we have some funny stories like players that decide that bring the deck, and we had one player that brought 52 cards, or like just randomly they were playing live and like something is wrong and the player was playing with 52 cards, and that happens a lot with paper magic, things that don't happen really with arena, but definitely some challenges there. And let me see here what our people in the comments are telling us about. We have a lot of people rooting for specific people, and that's also one of the most awesome parts. Arya, you have been playing this event. Do you usually go back, watch the VOD, see what people commented about, what people said about
I
you?
I have to admit I don't. I like to not think too much about that and just focus on the magic. Also, speaking of focusing on the magic, there was one thing I wanted to touch on in the between these two players' deck list for this match we're gonna see. See, we talked about how it's a Rakdos mirror. The decks are very similar, and I mean, obviously that means it's going to be a really skill-intensive game. These are two really grindy decks that are playing against each other. It's going to be very decision-intensive. Notably, one thing that's different between the two decks is Brittney has access to two copies of Blade Coil Serpent in the sideboard. So with those plus the Vraska Sting of Betrayal Sting in the sideboard, while it might seem like a very even matchup in game one, Brittney is definitely prepared for the sideboard game. So I definitely so it'll be interesting to see how Jzjaws manages to uh, keep up with that and what counterplay they
Okay.
found.
So
That
thank
seems
you for your
great, and I'm also
patience.
excited to see it. And it looks like our players are ready, and we are ready to start this so awaited semifinal. It's the last semifinal, and then we have the finals. Everything here live for you today. And as we have Brittney's side, we see three lands: Go for Throat, Graveyard Trespasser, Shieldred, and Invoke Despair. That seems like a mono black curve, but it seems like a great one. What do you think of this curve, Sky?
I think it's great, especially going second. You get the extra card. You have Go for the Throat. Yeah, you're going to be establishing your board presence a little late, but it's a perfectly fine hand for being on the draw.
And we see kind of a similar end on the other side. Arya, what do you think of on the end on Jacob's side?
I definitely really like the hand here. Every card in the hand is in some way or the other 2 for 1. Even Graveyard Trespasser, which doesn't draw cards, requires 2 cards to kill. And Bankbuster is definitely one for just taking over games on its own, drawing a ton of cards. So I think this is exactly what you want to have game one on the play, which is just a solid curve, 2 into 3 into 4, and just run your opponent out of cards.
I completely agree. And here we see, though, the disadvantage of choosing Go for Throat instead of Infernal Grasp. One of the reasons that people choose sometimes choose the Infernal Grasp is mainly because Wreck and Blockbuster, and also a lot of reasons why some people bring up Braids. What do you think of these Bankbuster cards, Sky?
I'm actually surprised we haven't seen it tonight up till this point. As Arya said, it makes a lot of advantage. It attacks. It pretty much does everything here. And oh yeah, Go for the Throat can't hit it. So yeah, I mean, you really can't beat the advantages that Bankbuster has. And now, speaking of advantages, there's Shieldred.
And definitely, we see here Jacob being able to pressure a lot with that Bankbuster, leaving Brittney at 13. And Arya, particularly in this matchup, how do you think life plays a big role, especially dealing more damage in the beginning?
I think life total is surprisingly important. Many people see the Smash and they see two grindy decks. It's all about card advantage. It's all about uh, incrementally gaining little bits of advantage and winning. But both these decks have cards that suddenly apply a lot of pressure with Shieldred and Invoke Despair and Graveyard Trespasser. So if you fall behind on life early, you can get into a lot of trouble. So I think life total is actually a pretty key aspect of this matchup.
And here we see that Jacob is in a bit of a tricky situation because 4 lands, he didn't find a fifth land, and there's 3 drops and 2 drops. So he can only cast one spell this turn. What spell would you go for, maybe Sky, or what do you think of the options are here?
It's difficult. I think you actually go for Fable of the Mirror Breaker here. You do have the double shield route out, and you need more lands and a way to draw out of the situation. The only alternative is to maybe play the Harvester, put up more of a field presence, and then maybe draw with Bankbuster. Both are viable, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think it's really important to do what Jacob did, which is draw with Bankbuster. Really heads up play from them. Like, sure, getting Fable down is good, and will Fable's, I mean, the best card in the deck. But this is a matchup in which you can't afford to miss land drops. Every card in the deck draws so many cards that you rarely run out, but running out of mana can be really, really bad. So, really heads up play from Jacob to recognize that that was the most important thing for them to do and make sure they hit their land drop, even though it meant even though it meant tapping lower early and maybe not getting to cost Fable.
That is a great point, Arya. And we see here now that Brittney is struggling on that side of not having that fifth mana and how important it is. What do you think of this Geeks command in end?
Gix's command is definitely one of the few ways of going over the top in this matchup. It The way these decks shape out, given how similar they are, is generally possible to put yourself in a position where Gix's command will take over the game for you, will take over the game and get you an overwhelming advantage by just positioning your board to not be so bad into it and trying to make sure your opponent has a board that is. So, definitely a trump card in this matchup, I'd say, and one of the few things that leaves you advantage game one. That said, it's not great when you're behind, particularly behind against larger creatures, so I don't know how well it's going to be positioned this game specifically.
And Sky, I see here, for example, that Jacob is running a Mirex. What do you think of this land card that is playing in Rakdos? Do you think it's one of also the advantage of playing two colors instead of three or four?
Absolutely. It's one of those advantages you have if you're not playing Grixis because you don't have to worry about the third color. You're only on two colors. So Mirex can be something that can kind of win the game pretty late if both fields are just absolutely devastated and you're stuck on land draw. I mean, at least you have a land that does something.
And we see here Brittney really needs to top deck that land, and maybe that's not even enough, right? Because we see that Jacob is threatening 8 damage, two more with shieldred. So for sure, Brittney will have to chump block something. Uh, Arya, what do you think is that card that Brittney is looking for? A land, or is it something else that maybe a shieldred that Brittney might think I need this top deck?
A land would certainly help, but it's hard in this spot thinking of a way that Brittney actually gets out of it. She's so far behind on life total, and we talked about all those cards like that Invoke Despair in hand that just chip away at the life total and that shield ridden play that's also hitting Brittney every turn. I don't think there's much she can actually draw to in this spot that's getting her out of this.
And we see here that that Childred is definitely doing some work, and Brittney not able to draw that fifth land yet, but getting another chance with Fable. But that chance costs two life. And here is where that Shieldred is so good, because you need an answer for Shieldred, but also every time you try to look for an answer, you have to pay life for that try. And I think we probably will see here a game number two. How do you think Sky, these players will now look into the sideboard against this kind of mirror?
You're going to be looking for mirror breakers here. So we were talking about some of those earlier. We were talking about the Vraska in this instance that we just had. We're talking about the Blade Coil Serpent that Arya was talking about. There are just so many different ways in which you think, okay, how am I going to break the mirror here? And those are two pretty good mirror breaker cards. I'm really looking forward to seeing how they might possibly play a role in game two.
What about you, Arya? What do you think the sideboard is going to look like?
I definitely agree with Skyler. There was some really insightful analysis where you just want cards that can go over the top. The Mirror Breakers, Fable of the Mirror Breaker itself aside, generally lean towards being in matchups like this where it's grindy and goes long, the more expensive, more powerful cards that can take over the game. And Blade Coil Serpent, Gix's Command, Vraska, all examples of those cards that can definitely gather a lot of advantage going long. So Brittney, I'd say, definitely has a better chance at both spot games, and Jacob really needed to win that game one to make sure that they weren't trying to win back to back games post spot. So, first step down for them, but it's still going to be complicated to win the match from here.
And as you said here, players taking their time to decide. It's a complex, as you said, sideboard situation, and Brittney now on the play, giving her a bit of an advantage. Um, and this opener, it does have interesting cards. What do you think, Sky, of this opening end for Brittney?
So it's missing a 2-drop, right? You want to try to have a 2-drop. You want to be able to interact with the board immediately if you're on the play. It does some good stuff later on, but is later on too late here is the real question.
And we see here that Jacob deciding to do a mul. We cannot really see what is in their end, but we see that there's a mulligan happening. And how aggressively do you need to mulligan, Arya, in this matchup?
I think this is one of the matchups in which you want to mull least aggressively. Every card really, really matters. There's hand attack from both sides sometimes. Every card in the deck is either some sort of threat that demands an answer or a piece of interaction. So trading card for card really matters. And you really want to avoid mulliganing if you can.
But if you are mulligan for 5, so this is a mul to 5, this is a hand you really want to have, right? Harvester on 2 into a Fable that allows you to look for your spells. Here we see that Jacob drawing a lot of ends, but that is not a big deal because of Fable, right? Unless, of course, Brittney finds an answer. And we see how Fable is so important. Why, Sky, do you think this card, Fable of the Mirror Breaker, has taken over not only standard but multiple formats like Modern and Pioneer?
It does so many things for one card, right? So for things to kind of withstand the test of more eternal formats, it has to have multi-use. It has to work in multiple decks with multiple strategies in it. And it does it all. It creates treasure tokens. It draws cards. It duplicates things. It makes your opponent deal with it. I can't think of a single card in recent history that is as important and pivotal as that card. And even, let's say, even on one, if it were to be destroyed, you still get that token on the field that generates a treasure. You really cannot lose with that card unless it either happens too late or you don't maybe get to the draw phase if you need cards. But most of the time, you're going to be getting some kind of advantage off of the card, if not multiple advantages.
And one thing also, just a fun fact, is that Fable was only printed in Kamigawa so far. So this card is really searched for, and specifically the tokens. I think the tokens themselves, I don't want to be saying something incorrect, but I heard they were going for like €5 or something like that, $5, which is crazy for at least here in Europe for tokens, and it just shows how many people are looking for these cards and want to play Fable of the Mirror Breaker. Arya, though, on the other side, what do you think here of this Trespasser when it flips, and how much of a threat it can be?
I mean, Trespasser, I think it exemplifies the issues we're talking about, where life total can really, really matter in this matchup, because Trespasser, when flipped, applies so much pressure. So I definitely think it's nothing to be scoffed at. It's no cop suppressor that it doesn't draw a card, but Trespasser applying a bunch of pressure, making it for as much as an 8-point life swing in a single turn when it's flipped, because you attack for 4, they lose 2, you gain 2. That's really impactful and can really swing the game very quickly. So I'd say it's a pretty key card in terms of actually ending the game rather than just slowly gaining incremental card advantage, which is what a lot of other cards do.
And what do you think of these board state, Sky? Because now we think Jacob can go for also for the Invoke Despair. So how do you think this is lining up?
I think that this is the most ideal scenario overall that Jacob could have happened. I mean, remember, Mull down to 5, that's brutal. Even more so brutal, Mull down to 5 in the top 4 of a major tournament. Jacob is handling this so well. They've really positioned themselves well to try to make a real serious stance and come back in this game. And the Bank Buster and the Invoke Despairs definitely contribute to it. And speaking of plural Invoke Despairs, what timing there? That is a second Invoke Despair here from Jacob.
And here, Invoke Despair is sort of like draw 3 cards, your opponent loses 6 lives situation, which is not bad. But it looks like both of the players with a lot of answers, but not a real threat, right, Arya? And do you think this often happens, is these mirror matches, that they just have a lot of answers, but they need these cards like the Fable or the Shieldred?
Yeah, definitely in post-spot games where there's just a ton of interaction being brought in. It's also the games do tend to lean in this way, specifically because of Invoke Despair. Invoke Despair lines up so well against any threat. It's trading up against almost anything, and so that pushes you away from wanting to bring in more threats that deal with Invoke Despair. Instead, you want to take them out, and it instead pushes you towards trying to keep as much efficient interaction to make sure your invokes can win the game on their own and just generate a ton of card advantage.
And here we see exactly that. Both players using and abusing that Invoke Despair. And they didn't really have to play many creatures to put the opponent down to 11 in case of Jacob. And Brittney being able to put Jacob down to 7.
Yeah, I think this particular spot is a testament to why Fable of the Mirror Breaker is so strong on multiple axes. I mean, we see it, well, Fable itself trading for 2 removal spells generally, and the Fable enchantment getting more value on top of that. But also, we're looking at both players with 6 or 7 cards in hand, and that makes that mana off the Goblin Shaman really, really important. I think that's a key part of Fable of the Mirror Breaker's strength in Magic today, is the fact that, well, a lot of cards today just draw a lot of cards, like Invoke Despair, and Fable of the Mirror Breaker not only gives you multiple cards, but also gives you mana to use them, and that's really, really key in decks like this and spots like this.
And we have here our boards developing. Sky, the situation is getting insane on both sides. Is this something we often see in mid-range? Because these decks are very tailored to either get a more strategy to just beat aggro, and then sideboard they also have a lot of answers for like duress for more control decks. But how do you feel this matchup of the mid-range goes, and what do you think of this board here?
The matchup of the mid-range all depends on who can generate the most card advantage quickly. However, there's that second wrinkle in this that Arya talked about, and that's life total. Life total means a lot more than it typically would in a format. You know, you always hear the phrase, life is a resource. Well, here, life is a little bit more than a resource here, as you do need it to work with. You have to deal with Shieldred pings. You have to deal with Invoke Despair pings. You have to account for all of that here. And here's something that I probably think Jacob hasn't accounted for quite yet with this board state. That is a Blade Coil Serpent there. There is an Infernal Grasp. We were talking about grasp versus go for the throat earlier, and this is where that decision is going to pay off big here. But let's say that there wasn't a infernal grasp there. That's one of those things where, again, this is a mirror breaker here, and this is going to make, well, theoretically would make a pretty big impact had that infernal grasp not been there. However, there are still some activations here, and again, that will generate further card advantage.
And Arya, you were talking exactly about this particular card on Brittney's deck, and guess what? It's making a huge impact right now. What are your views on this Blade Coil Serpent?
I mean, it's a mirror breaker for a reason. It's essentially trading for 4 cards here, and that's in no small part because of some really, really heads up play from Brittney. I mean, she could have just gone for putting 4 red mana into that Blade Coil Serpent and trying to go for lethal here, or at least putting some red mana into that Blade Coil Serpent, forcing a trump block with the 2/2, applying a bunch of pressure. But you recognize that she's so far ahead on cards, the only way she really loses this game is if she doesn't try and get some of those cards out of Jacob's hand and they're able to rebuild as well as possible. So recognizing that forcing them to discard cards rather than trying to go for the higher upside lethal line. Really smart play from Brittney. I really, really like it.
And we see here that Brittney can leave Jacob in a tricky situation. And one fun fact is that Brittney is actually running a lot of artifacts, like because we have the Blade Coil, we have this Bankbuster, and those Gold for Throat suddenly don't look that appealing because they cannot deal with these kind of creatures. Sky, what do you think here, for example, of the choice of the one Infernal Grasp that we saw Jacob bring, and why is it playing over a Braid, for example?
Well, the Infernal Grasp could truly save Jacob here because that was the only card they had to deal with the Blade Coil Serpent. Again, Go for the Throat cannot hit artifact creatures. We were talking about this before. A Braid could arguably have been really good there as well, but again, I believe Infernal Grasp is just that much more flexible, right? Again, this isn't the only deck you're playing against. And as we get to the finals here, you don't get to rotate your deck like in the rest of the weeks of the VML. What you register, I believe, for the top 8 is what you have to play in the next 3 matches. So you do have to account for that as well.
Yeah, and I'm just going to point out a really smart play that Brittney made that we didn't get to see come up. But you'll notice after Brittney blocked with that pilot token, she crewed the Bankbuster to play around Invoke Despair just to have a thing to sacrifice to take 2 fewer damage. It's that sort of strong play. Those sort of really heads up decisions that you can expect from the players in our top 8 of the VML. In this spot, I'd say I think Brittney is pretty far ahead. There's so many cards in hand for her, so it's really just a matter of making sure she doesn't take lethal damage, plays a little cautiously, and manages to stay alive.
Yeah, I want to add to what you said here, Arya. You're talking about crewing a thing and taking 2 less damage. I mean, that's going to play a pivotal role here, too. There's creatures and there's enchantments here. Suddenly, a draw like Invoke Despair doesn't seem quite as strong as it could be. And that never even occurred to me until you were talking about that play.
And yeah, yet another heads up play from Brittney, recognizing that Shaw is going down a card to deal with this Trespasser, but if she doesn't, it could crew the Bankbuster. She could be taking a lot of damage, so it's kind of something she needs to answer. Otherwise, she risks losing the game this upcoming turn.
And the board situation is gotten really crazier. Both players at 7 life. We need something, and it looks like these fables are going to make it or break it. And surprise, surprise, we have Fable of the Mirror Breaker. So, how many Fables did we have so far in this match? 3? Maybe the 4th one?
I've lost count tonight overall.
We should
I think it
start
may have
having
been
a
5,
Fable of the Mirror
actually.
Breaker count.
Oh,
And is this it? Oh no, Brittney down to 1. Is that Invoke Despair enough?
Well, again, we were
No.
talking about this earlier. So it would only deal the 2 damage because there's still enchantments on board and not too much else going on here. So it could be powerful, but in this situation, probably not the draw that Brittney was hoping for here.
So
Yeah.
Invoke Despair on its own, not quite enough. But what might happen here is, depending depending on how this turn goes, we might see Brittney trying to get in with one of those Bankbusters, put counters on it with Gix's command, and then maybe finish off Jacob with Invoke Despair on a future turn. But what's most important, I think, at this point is for Brittney to just make sure she can crew one of those Bankbusters to gain some life. Otherwise, there's so many draws from Jacob's deck that just win the game.
And
Ooh.
we are looking at this Brittney using the Fable of the Mirror Breaker ability, trying to get something relevant here. This Geeks command will allow to Brittney to at least get some board advantage, but
Yeah.
things could could go either
Hmm.
way. What okay. What happened?
Brittney accidentally skipped through a turn, which is an unfortunate way to end because I believe she had lethal that turn with playing out the Archfiend, crewing a Bankbuster, and then wiping Jacob's board. But one of the downsides of online play is misclicks sometimes happen.
Yeah, and now we have a situation where I think this was 2 games for Jacob, right?
Yep, I believe that puts them in the finals.
Yeah, congratulations. And Brittney, it's an unfortunate way to go, but you did so amazing this season. She did really great, and the top 8, or even top 4, is a great accomplishment. So congratulations on making that VML Championship finals and also the regional championship alongside some sweet cash prize. And sorry that happened. It happens. With playing online, these things kind of happen to me. They happen a lot on MTGO for some reason, but greatly played by both of our players, and congratulations to both. So what are we expecting here for the finals, Sky?
Well, again, I feel like the theme of the night, I feel like I'm being exhaustive about this, but it's totally true. How much value can you get out of a single card? And how can you translate that to the game as a whole? So, not just the card, but what you do with those cards, how you respond to those cards. It's going to be, again, life total is relevant, but it's also about how do you make the most out of what's in your hand and what's on the field, which might seem obvious, but there's so many different lanes and fields of play you can make here. So it's just depending on not only what's in hand, but how both players react to that and react to the pressure of being in the finals, of course.
Yeah, there's a big pressure here on the finals. I think when you play this tournament, the first pressure you have is into making it to the playoffs, obviously. Then you have the pressure of making it into top 8, because the top 8 guarantees you disqualifications, right? And then I think the next one is the winning, because that's the title that you want. Not only the money but the title, and you also get a special token made out for you. You have some sweet tokens, right, Arya, from your winnings
Oh,
of the VML.
yeah, they're wonderful.
And you get your name on the Hall of Fame of the VML, which is actually really nice. And it's always nice to see. It was one. We are already in 9th season of this tournament, and we have a look here at our brackets. Um, Jen and Jay Z making it into the finals. And Arya, what do you think of this matchup that we are going to see on the finals? And also, was it expected that we saw these decks making it and doing so well in the tournament?
Yeah, so I think the decks we're seeing here in the finals, Rakdos and Esper. I mean they've been the stars of recent tournaments, performing well time and time again. So it's no surprise to see them in the finals. And this particular matchup, I think it's all going to come down to those cards from Jen's deck that we talked about at the start. Those Gixes, those copies of Kaito in the sideboard, just engine cards that can take over the game are the one Esper's best bet against Rakdos. You really, really want cards that can draw you a bunch of cards and give you more card advantage than Rakdos can keep up with from one for wanting. So I think it's all going to come down to that. If Jen can get off the ground with her engine cards, start generating advantage from them, then I'd expect to see her ahead. Otherwise, Rakdos is just going to come in and clean up the late game.
And we actually are going to see here once again our players, our finalists lists, and we start here with Jen. And I now I want to emphasize on this question that we made on the questionnaire: what would winning the VML mean to you? Because now this seems more real than ever. And Jen has to say, winning the VML would mean a lot to me. I've played in all 9 seasons and would love to have the crown, and that would be a great way to finish this season 9. Sky, what do you think here Jen is looking for, and how do you think nerves might interfere, or having to play this match live, the pressure, and it's being the winner in for this tournament championship and this crown that Jen talks about?
I think the key to this, and Arya was talking about this before with high pressure situations, is not overthinking. That is something I've seen a ton of Magic players crumble over pressure. Yes, it's good to think through your moves, but there is also that element of overthinking as well too. The biggest decision, honestly, right off the bat, is just how aggressively are you going to mulligan? What do you consider a keepable hand? What do you not consider a keepable hand? How might that change during a high stakes situation such as this? So again, good to think, but very good also to not overthink these situations.
And let's see what Jay-Z here is playing. I see a lot of Jay-Z fans in chat as well as Jen. Always nice to see you support our players. And he is playing these Rakdos mid-range that we saw. Any key cards, Arya, against specifically Jen?
I think, well, I mean, obviously there's the fable of the mirror breaker that takes over games, but beyond that, it's just a pile of cut downs and go for the throats. It's just all about interacting with Esper and then letting your fables and shieldreds take over the game. It's hard to pin down a key card for Rakdos ever because so many of the cards in the deck do similar things, interact in similar ways. And so it's more about the overall Rakdos game plan, which involves just interacting with everything Esper does, and the onus is really on Esper to find some way to defy the paradigm and get ahead before Rakdos eventually, inevitably takes over.
And here to the question, what would winning the VML mean to you? They answered, winning the VML would be very cool. It's my first actual tournament, so would be a pretty crazy start. And whoa, I did not know that, but it looks like it's Jay-Z first tournament, and he's doing so amazing, crushing it. Really, really hyped here for both of our players. We have on one side Jen, that has played for 9 seasons and wants to be crowded finally champion of the VML. On the other side, we have a rookie on the VML, let's say, first time playing an actual tournament. So let's see here who gets this crown. And are our players ready to start since this is a live match? And it looks like they are. And let's take a look at their opening. And Arya, what do you think of this opening hand here for Jennifer?
I think it's a strong opening hand. Talia on the play, particularly, is a 2 drop that doesn't die to cut down on turn 2. If you play Talia on turn 2, the Rakdos deck needs to untap and then kill Talia.
Oh, so something happened, and we are not sure, but we are going to take. I wonder if it has to be with the. Oh, it was a misclick. Okay. So I think we are going to solving this technical issue. It happened. I was like, what happened? That was quite a fast way to go. But let the players get this sorted out. It happens. Also, I had someone say in Discord that actually what happened with Brittney was not a misclick, but it might have been running out of time because we saw how long these turns get so
Mm.
intensive. And Arena does have
Mhm.
a pretty sharp tight clock, unless and like for example MTGO where you have this time and you can manage it however you like. Did it ever challenge you, the timing on Arena, for example, Sky, to you? Do you ever felt that pressure?
Okay, so real quick, yes. If you remember Lucky Clover, I ran out of time during a qualifier. The only time I ever ran out of time, but I had to pick a qualifier event to do so. So yes, absolutely. You got to be careful to click through all those triggers. Cat oven probably also being included there. But yeah, very excited for this match. Let's go.
And it looks like both players decided to keep their ends. And we have here Jen with a great start. We have our bringer. We saw this card in the past. Cut down though, perfect answer. And cut down surprisingly has a lot of answers for Esper Legends, right, Arya?
Yeah, Cut Down in particular is really good. It trades up against every 2 mana card in the deck. And in general, the Rakdos decks answers line up really well because, well, Cut Down, Go for the Throat are both just incredibly efficient answers to anything Esper does.
And I have to point out the amount of answers that Jacob has in end, but also at the same time, we see that Jen is going to be putting a lot of pressure with Shieldred in hand, and we know how good that card is. Definitely Jacob needs that fourth land, otherwise things might get tricky. But he also has the Bankbuster to allow to draw some cards and get that advantage. Sky, what do you think of the choice of Geeks here? Because it's a card that we don't see in all Esper Legend decks, but Jen decided to bring to this tournament.
I would totally bring Gix into a tournament in a field where card advantage and drawing is everything. Gix can single-handedly pull a player out of a very bad situation. So I think Gix is a rather strong choice, especially in an Esper Legends deck where it can be protected by Plaza of Heroes, for instance.
For sure, and here Jen going with Talia. Talia going to make Jacob life a bit more difficult, casting that Invoke Despair. But we know that Jacob actually has a lot of creatures in end, so not a problem. And Arya, what do you think here of the choice of, instead of trying to find land with the Bankbuster, to just go and pressure with these Graveyard Trespassers?
I think it was really important for Jacob in that spot to get down a second blocker. Gix is really, really strong at taking over the game if it starts hitting. So I think Jacob recognized they need to get down a blocker, need to make sure this Gix isn't getting in for damage because otherwise they're in a lot of trouble.
And we see here Jen playing that Shieldred. That's definitely going to be a challenge for Jacob to deal with, especially with no removal. He does, though, draw that land that he desperately needs. And now we have a up-nap situation again. We need to also have an up-nap count. So we have Shieldred into Shieldred. And Sky, I want to get your opinion on these channel lands, because I've seen a lot of these lands. They, for example, go against Talia ability, so they don't cost more because they are an ability or not a spell. Same with counter spell, they dodge that. How do you think these channel lands change standard?
Well, these are some of the strongest land cycles we've had right now. You think we have the Triumphs in standard right now. We have all different kinds of very valuable lands here, but these are amongst the most valuable. Why? Because this prevents land flood. It creates very interesting scenarios where you can hold mana to create any kind of tricks. I mean, we haven't even seen what would be considered to be the most valuable land from this cycle, and that is Basiju, who endures. We don't get a chance to see that much unless it's in Jund currently. So, yeah, very valuable land cycle. We're definitely going to be missing these when they leave standard soon.
But I think it looks like Wizards is, and I know Arya cannot speak on this, but he's designing a lot of these kind of lands that actually do things, and it's actually really good, because one of the things that Magic lacked for some time is that if you get flooded, or you don't have enough lands, it's a big issue and the game just ends there. But these allowing you to be able to play more consistently. And we have here triggers from Shieldred. And what do you think of this board state, Arya?
Yeah, the spot state's a complicated one for Jacob. There's really not good spots here. They need to deal with the Gix, otherwise it's drawing a bunch of cards. They need to deal with the Shieldred because that's applying pressure to their life total. And either way, they can't kill either of these creatures without a double block. Double blocking the Shieldred loses them 2 creatures, so they're slightly priced into double blocking Gix. But at that point, the Shieldred's sticking around. They're drawing. Jen is drawing a card off Gix, and this is really exactly what I was talking about when I mentioned the Esper deck getting its engines going, because each of these cards is capable of taking over the game on its own, and it's really, really hard for Jacob to deal with so many of them when all of them are individually such big threats.
And I can completely see your point there, Arya. And it looks like, as you said, things are looking really tricky for Jacob. And you're having to double spell with Trespasser and maybe the Harvester, or even drawing with the Bankbuster. Down to 14 life, Sky. How does these life totals change so fast? And how is Jen being able to, just with Shieldred and Rafine, basically create all this card advantage?
The life is just disappearing one bit at a time, and we have pings from Shieldred, pings from Invoke Despair, pings from attacks, pings from attacking in the air. There's a little bit of everything here, and again, it's so easy to lose track of life. There's so much being gained, so much being lost. So it's hang on, somebody driving by. There's so much being gained, there's so much being lost, and it's really easy all of a sudden to see the life totals flip, or the life totals like completely like get into the single digits low on both sides. It's one of those, you have to be aware of it every single step of the way in these grindy mid-range matches.
And it's so tricky here because Jen has multiple ways to protect Shieldred, either with the Skrelv or with the Plaza. And Jacob knows that, right? How frustrating it is, Arya, to know that your opponent just has an answer in case you block. And how do you feel about this decision here of deciding not to block?
Well, I really don't think there's any good blocks for Jacob. They have to give up two creatures to just trade with a Plaza of Heroes, and then, like you said, the Scroll was keeping the Shield Red alive even through removal. So definitely a frustrating spot, and not a spot in which there's a lot they can do. The Shield Red is just going to take over the game and end the game in a turn or two, and just against all the protection you mentioned, there's not really removal for it, and the red black deck does not have that much by way of life gain. Not definitely not enough to stabilize from a spot like this.
Yeah, and here Jen cannot deal with those trespassers the because the go for throat the ward cost needs to discard a card. There's no card to discard, but this go for throat is going to be able to deal with this shieldred that we know it's going to enter the battlefield. And I think this is game, right? If my math is not failing me, this might be it for Jen here taking game one.
Yep. I believe this should be game.
We never know until the end, but it looks like things are looking fairly well for Jenier, and even Jacob just drawing a card, losing two more life, and this is going to be it. Probably we'll see a concession or just Jen attacking for the win, since we know that Jacob doesn't have any mana open, so nothing that Jennifer is afraid of. She is just having fun now, attacking with her creatures, and that's going to be it for game one. And Sky, what do you think about sideboarding now with Jacob on the play?
So with Jacob on the play, we're probably going to see a slightly more aggressive approach and then a slightly more controlling approach from Jennifer, because these are mid-range decks. Both players are going to adjust depending on if they're on, both players are on play draw. So again, just look for those differences in play based upon the turn order alone.
And look at how much value this Rafin is able to get. Just alone being able to get all these triggers, also for Shieldred, and these cards of the Esper Legend deck just interact so well. And I wonder, Arya, who came up with this idea to just put a bunch of legends together and build this deck? Do you think Plaza was the reason that inspired this deck
I
to be
absolutely do.
popular?
Plaza of Hero is key to this deck. I mean, more even than the channel lands, the mana fixing it provides, and the extra land that has a bunch of utility as a protection for these cards like Shieldred, Rafine, Gix that take over the game on their own. That protection from Plaza of Heroes is the main draw to this deck, and I think what makes this deck possible.
And we see here the Jacob sideboard. We see that is deciding what to bring. And what do you feel, Sky? It can be a decision here from his side.
So there's a lot going on with this. And again, this is a pretty complex situation. There is temporary lockdown, and I'm curious as to if that's going to get played. We also have Gix's command, which could play a role here. There's a few different ways of going about it, but remember, for every card you want to put in, you have to take out. So you have to think about, okay, what combination of this deck is going to give myself the best chance to win the game? From Jen's perspective here, it's going to be on the draw, going second. So we have to think about those things. Jen here taking out the AO, the Dawn Sky, because again, that is one that's higher up on the curve. And all right. Adjustments have been made here. Very, very good.
And it's worth noting that despite being on the draw, I'd say Jen is very much still the aggressor here. It's particularly because of those engine cards, those two copies of Gix, and those two Kaitos she brought in. She really wants to take the initiative and have these cards get a bunch of card advantage, as opposed to when you're behind, when Kaito and Gix are very unimpressive and somewhat low on rate compared to other options.
And actually, I this list from Jen is really interesting. If I'm not incorrect, it does or not run any wedding announcements, which usually is like one of the most popular cards and is done fairly well in tournaments. Even in Europe, we had a lot of a top eight with a team that a lot of players made good results in this tournament, and actually a world qualification, the second place for Esper Legends, and it was actually with 4 wedding announcements. Arya, why do you think Jen deciding here not to bring wedding announcements?
Well, there is, of course, the fact that wedding announcement doesn't play particularly well with Talia, but more than that, I think it's about wedding announcement not playing great as an assertive tool the way other threats might be. Like, I mean, specifically, the cards being run in those wedding announcement slots include things like Gix, which are very good, particularly on the play, which Jen knew she was going to be through a lot of the top eight. And so the choices she made going for cards that take over the game rather than wedding announcement makes a lot of sense into a meta of mostly expecting to have Rakdos and Grixis, where those cards give you amount of card advantage that Rakdos and Grixis can't keep up with, while things like wedding announcement can eventually be outcarded by cards like Fable.
I completely agree there. And here we see how Talia impacts these so much, not allowing Jacob, for example, to cast that Fable. And we see here a necessary cut down to get rid of that Rafine before the Connive triggers. And Sky, how important do you think it is to stop these Rafine before the Connive starts?
Well, very much so, right? Because if you stop Rafina before the connive starts, then you can cut down it as opposed to using a go for the throat on it. And that go for the throat, you want to take care of Shieldred, whereas the cut down cannot. So yeah, you absolutely want to do that. In addition to that, again, the stronger Rafine gets, the tougher it is to get rid of. So yeah, it's kind of one of those situations where you have to do that. Otherwise, there's going to be some severe consequences within the game.
And we see here that Jacob trying to get rid of that Talia successfully. In response, Jen decides to use Takanuman very well, while she does have 2 legends and is able to get it for a discount. And Arya, how do you think Takanuma can be an important card for Esper Legends?
So Takanuma, Otawara, Aiganjo are all really, really key in giving the Esper Legends deck staying power. I mean, this deck full of creatures, as we talked about, there's almost no non-creatures in it. This deck full of creatures is always going to have a hard time beating board wipes, beating decks that just interact a lot going into the late game. And those Legends cards are very, very important in making sure you can just have some staying. Those Legends lands can make sure you have some staying power and essentially run 40 something spells in function, because your lands double up as spells and give you the ability to have some chance at least at top decking against these Rakdos decks.
And Jacob here being aggressive, this 6/6 is going to start to deal some damage, and Fable on the other side. I think this Otawara probably is going to take a big role here, deciding to just get rid of that big creature, and Rafine now being able to start that conniving that we all know about. But there's a key card in Jacob's and which is Geeks. And what do you think, Sky, of these Geeks here in this situation?
I believe the Gix's command will help to stabilize this board ultimately. It should be able to provide multiple avenues for Jacob to get out of here, and then the Archfiend can always come back and finish the job, right? So Gix's command might be just what Jacob needs at this point in time.
Yeah, it's a little awkward against this specific board because only one of Jen's cards has power 2 or less, so his Gix's command can't quite wipe up the board, and that leaves Jen in a spot where she can start to accrue value with whatever's left over.
Yeah, and we see here the Fable trigger. right now that cut down is looking pretty good, being able to deal with the Rafine, and there's even a possibility to do, as we see here, the again the 6/6 flyer, and then attacking, doing the cut down with the treasure being able to pay, and things. If there was an advantage bar, Sky, where would you put it right now?
This is kind of a difficult, right? Because we have the ability for Gix's command, but also that clock for Jacob is running fast, especially for that go for the throat there. And Jen gaining life off of the Danik, just continuing to press that card advantage. I would say it's definitely on Jen at this point, just because of that clock alone.
Yeah, and also being able to use Takanuma to get whatever she needs for next turn, even if that Geeks command is going to happen, which it might end up happening. Also, one thing is that that Geeks command can give lifelink to something and +2/+2. So maybe here, Jacob's deciding the +2/+2 lifelink, sacrifice the creature with the highest power. So here, actually, Jen can choose whatever creature she prefers to sacrifice. But the important part is that, oh, but the way that happens is that now the Takanuma cannot resolve, right, Arya?
Well, there's not black mana for the Takanuma to have activated to activate the Takanuma anyway. So with only the one black non-legend land, Jen was kind of forced into not activating Takanuma this turn. And one thing that's worth noting that happened from that turn is that swing with the Goblin token gave Jacob the artifact they needed to get back a creature with soul transfer. So I'm not sure what exactly is in their graveyard at this point, but if there's a shield root there, then oh well, there's the Archfiend we know about. Then there's definitely threats coming across that will be hard for Jen to deal with at this point, since she doesn't have much by way of interaction.
Oh, and we see there, speaking of head, we see the 6/6 flyer Archfiend, and this is great to put kind of a stop on this pressure that Jen is making with the Flyers. But still, if that's the play for the turn for Jacob, the truth is that Jen is one answer away to deal with the Fiend and win the game, because right now Jacob at 5 life and these little 3/2s, which are not huge but definitely threatening, threatening here to take off the game. And Sky, where do you think this game going now? It could go either ways, right?
Absolutely. The thing is that Jacob does have that reflection at Kiki Jiki. I'm always keeping an eye on that if it has potential to make more creatures. So that's something that I would keep an eye on throughout. Jacob also has that soul transfer, as discussed before, and another Fable of the Mirrorbreaker. So there's a decision right now that Jacob's thinking about. Do I try to control the board with the soul transfer, or try to gain further advantage with the Fable of the Mirrorbreaker, or keep the mana up and have things ready to duplicate? This is such a twisted scenario right now for Jacob.
Yeah, it's a slightly awkward spot for soul transfer because doing that would not allow them to get back something at the moment because they'd have to spend the treasures.
Oh, and here very wisely played by Jacob, deciding to copy that 6/6 while in the end step, while Jennifer was tapped. What do you think of that decision there, Skylar? Sky, sorry, I'm calling you Skylar
No,
today.
you're good.
Sky, I apologize so much.
You're good. No worries. Uh, yeah, I mean, that's what I was talking about, right? Like, part of using the mana was to duplicate that Archfiend there. And now you're kind of looking at the situation. You're staring at 2/6/6 flyers. Yes, you lose the game, but like what I was saying before, those counters barely play a role. They rarely and barely play a role here. So now you're in this scenario where you can't get over these big 6/6s, and they sure as heck can swing back at you. So this is a pretty difficult situation. And again, talking about how life total can get away from you, Jen's now at 8, and now looking at a shield read here from Jacob.
Yeah,
Yeah, this game looks pretty over to me. I believe Jacob has lethal several different ways.
I like how you already calculated in your mind different ways to go for a little. And did it ever happen to you that you have a way to finish a game but you have several ways, and you're watching a match that you see just one way, and that person ends up going with another way, and you're like, what are they doing? But in the end, it also works out.
Yeah, that happens all the time. I mean, I generally like to trust my opponents. Most of the people you play against in tournaments like that, particularly the VML top 8 like this, are really, really strong players. So it's just good practice to assume that your opponent has some reason for what they're doing. But in this spot, the soul transfer line, definitely a fairly obvious line to end the game for Jacob. They can just copy an Archfiend, and that should very easily be lethal.
But there's an A Gunjo on the other side uh, that can
So
get
I
rid
don't
of
believe
that
the
token.
Ganjo will be enough because the Harbin dying will lose Jen a bunch of life thanks to the static ability on Archfiend of the Dross.
That's true, and that also leaves mana open for Jacob to play that Shieldred and just finish Jen on her upkeep. Oh yeah, there's the Archfiend, as you said. Yeah, there's the trigger. I always forget that it also does this. This card is actually pretty insane, and we are going to have a game number 3. Arya, do you think is there any different way the players are going to sideboard here now?
Not really. I wouldn't be surprised to see Jen bring in some slightly more aggressive cards on the play to really push the advantage. But in all honesty, since the rules are the same on the play of the draw for these decks, the red black deck's always looking to be controlling. The Esper deck is always looking to be aggressive and take the initiative. That means that sideboarding will generally stay the same for game 2 and 3.
Completely agree. And what do you think, Sky? Do you agree also with Arya and think this is going to kind of stay the same here?
Yeah, very much so. You're going into game 3 in a high pressure. While it would be cool to have that Razor Lash in there, for instance, you don't want to see that during most stages of the game. So I agree on keeping that in the sideboard and just relying upon the cards that have gotten you there at this point.
And I'm still surprised on how much this Archfiend card does, honestly. I haven't seen this card play that much, to be honest. I even run it a bit in my sideboard, but it's amazing how much advantage it can bring. But honestly, I'm always so scared to play it just because of that part that says lose the game.
Intimidating decks, definitely, but in practice, you have to lose 4 counters to lose the game, and I mean, in that time, you've hit your opponent with a 6/6 4 times, so it's very hard to live through and die because of those counters.
And Arya, we saw here Jen mulligan to 6. What do you think of this opener?
I like this opener. I mean, if Jen hits her third land, this opener is fantastic. She gets to just take over the game with Yawgmoth or Kaito or any number of other options. So there's the third land, and I really, really like Jen's spot here.
And what do you agree, Sky? And what do you think of Jacob's and in the other side?
Jacob's hand isn't terrible. You are getting that turn 3 Fable of the Mirror Breaker, turn 4 Shieldred, but you do have Jen being the aggressor here still. You know, even with that Harbin being destroyed, you have Rafine, you have Talia, you have Gix. I mean, this is a pretty strong opener, but we'll see what Fable of the Mirror Breaker brings. That draw is going to be pretty important for Jacob.
For sure, and we see here very key cards on both sides. We see Children in Hand for Jacob, Fable of the Mirror Breaker, and the other side we see Jen with key cards like Talia and Rafine. So this game could go either ways. What's your thought, Harry, on this?
Yeah. I think it really comes down to which of the payoffs Jen goes with this turn and how they line up. Oh, never mind. Doesn't go for the throw. Jen's excellently positioned now because she has an answer to Shieldred. She's drawing a ton of cards a turn. So I really, really like her spot.
But a difficult decision on what to discard here, right? Because you just want all the cards, they're all valuable. And it looks like maybe Jen decided between Kaido and Geeks, deciding to maybe go with Kaido. What do you think here, Sky? Do you agree with Arya that this board state now it's much favored for Jen?
Very much so, especially with the Shieldreds. The only thing is, Jen can only deal with one of the 2 Shieldreds, so that's going to be a little bit of an issue later on. Yes, Rafine can get over the top and pretty often, which is nice, but if Jacob doesn't discard the second Shieldred, this could be trouble here for Jen.
And I'm trying to take a look here at Jen's deck and also reading this plaza because this plaza has a lot of text. So you can add a mana of any color among legendary permanents you control. So that does allow you to cast that Go for the Throat on Shieldred. And
Yeah.
that's going to be the turn there from Jen. And this plaza is just so good. Like it has so much text. It's not only the mana to be able to cast the legendary spells, then it also gives you mana for the legends that you have, and then it also has the protection side of it later on in the game. And this conniving is going to start getting pretty crazy here. Would you put all your eggs in one basket or just diversify your counters here, Sky?
Uh,
Wow, this is quite the situation going on right now. Sorry, I was looking at the draws. I was looking at Skrelv and Urtai, both drawn here. I don't think I would put all my eggs in one basket, but it's tempting. But with the way in which life totals can change, it's kind of a tricky question. I definitely think this is a good setup for Jen here overall, but the situation here is that Jacob does have, 3 more cards in hand right now, plus a Kiki Jiki, plus a Shieldred. There are a lot of threats right now, despite the life total being different that Jacob does possess here. It's difficult to determine an advantage right now.
well, it's very rare that I disagree with you, Sky, because your analysis is usually just so spot on. But while I'm not generally a one basket kind of girl, when that basket flies and has Ward 1 and you have a Skrelv to protect the basket, this is now just getting a little labored. It's hard not to go and put counters on Rafine just because there's no flying blockers really in Jacob's deck. So in a really, really tough spot trying to actually deal with this Rafine. And so I really like going all in on it almost in this spot.
Yeah, and I totally can understand that here. I mean, look, it's not too hard to go all in either here with Dennick, right? You're still going to get something out of that theoretically, if that graveyard trespasser didn't exist there. But yeah, I totally see the argument for it. It's just the varying life total here is the only thing that has me kind of like, oh my gosh, what if something happens to that? But I see it. I see the eggs in the basket and their worth for sure.
And do you think here Jacob just wanted to block the damage from Talia, or maybe he forgot about that first strike ability, Arya?
Oh, I don't think anyone's forgetting about abilities at this level of play. I mean, our players got to the finals, and I think Jacob, that was actually really heads up play from them, recognizing that 100% going to be Gix's commanding and killing all the 2 and smaller creatures next turn. So they might as well prevent some damage with that Fable of the Mirror Breaker.
And that's why these players are there, and you also worry this spot, and I'm not, because you can see these plays that sometimes I'm like, oh, what are they doing? And then everything makes sense with the because they are thinking turns ahead, and that's actually great. This Geeks command was actually fairly good for Jacob here, although they are at 9 life, which can be a bit tricky, going down to 6 very soon. And that trespasser just got a bit worse since Jennifer did end up getting that Danik from the grave this turn.
Yeah, and this is the thing the Esper deck does. It puts a lot of pressure on you and slams Haymaker after Haymaker. And now, well, I mean, Jacob's still in this game, certainly, but they're definitely on the back foot trying to deal with all these things that Jen is doing.
It looks like it can go either ways at this point. It depends a lot on the top decks. Jen might need something like a Rafine, right, Sky? Something that allows you to get that advantage back.
Rafine would be good. However, you want to know my wish list right now if I'm Jen? Shieldred. 7 life left. Give me that Shieldred any day of the week here.
That's not surprising. And Arya, hear what you think of this Lauren. Does it wait for a Fable, or does he need to come to the ground soon to be
Well,
able
I'd want to
to
get Loran
defend?
down as soon as possible, but I do think making sure Urtai lives is important. It's the only creature on board that keeps up with the Graveyard Trespasser. So I like Jen's choice to activate the Plaza of Heroes there.
Yeah, also allows you now a chance to, as you said, like the creature is protected. Now your Skrelv is also going to be able to protect your creatures. And the truth is that we see that Jacob did top deck a land. So, and Mirex is good, but the creatures don't block. So both players now at 9 life. If there was an advantage bar, it would be pretty 50-50 right now. Do you agree or do you think not really?
Yeah,
That's
I
a
definitely do think this game is close. Uh, it's it's an interesting spot where Jen has more cards that end the game on the spot, but Jacob's definitely a little ahead on board in terms of the Trespasser doing a lot more than the cards on Jen's side of the board are doing. I'd be interested to see whether Jen double swells, maybe just to flip the Trespasser back, make sure it's not draining for 2 each turn, and whether maybe she's able to block it and stabilize that way instead of just taking damage from it over and over.
Also, something that might be relevant later on is that Skrelv also can make that a creature cannot be blocked by a certain color. That can finish games, right, Sky?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I've used that to finish games before. We haven't really seen that too much at all tonight because spells typically used to ward off removal spells. But it wouldn't surprise me if we got a chance to see that. Let's say Jacob drops Shieldred here and Jen's close to lethal. I could definitely see a world where that would happen.
And we see here Jen doing exactly what Arya said here. So Jen is playing that Skrelv to make sure that that Trespasser is going to flip. Now there's a Geeks command on the other side. Things
Yeah,
can
and Geeks'
change.
command
That
is
was a
just
great top
such a
deck.
brutal draw here.
Mhm.
It's sweeping up the Skrelv and the Loran at least, and definitely putting Jen on the back foot.
Each turn I'm like something is going to change, and each turn the advantage bar keeps swinging from 50 to it goes everywhere, which is really cool. And I'm glad we are having this kind of match for our finals, because sometimes you see a very one-sided match, but both players here already up one game, so one each side, and this is the third game, so we are able to have a lot of magic being played and showcasing the potential of these decks. Now, this might be game here, right? For Jacob, because now Janet 2 alive, and is this it, Arya? Do you think this might
Well,
be
I
it?
don't think it's quite over because Danik can block, gain some life. There can be some trades. I don't think Jen is done for, so to speak, but I don't like her spot very much. I think what she really needs is Jacob needs to miss for a turn and then she needs to draw Shield Red. Never mind, the game's over.
Yeah, that was a good top deck. And let's be honest, um, Jacob did have a lot of top decks that he could draw here that could make an impact. And I think this is going to be it. Congratulations. Let's see the damage happen. There it is. Congratulations to Jacob, new in the tournament scene and winning here the VML. What a great start here. Uh, Congratulations to our winner. Congratulations, of course, as well to Jen for an amazing showcasing of the deck and the ability of playing Magic. Jen has done so well, and congratulations on here coming second. I know sometimes can be a bit bittersweet, but it's an amazing result, and you should be really proud of yourself. Congratulations, Jacob. And Arya, what do you think of Jacob's performance during the night?
I mean, really impressive performance. I mean, play from them was stellar. They just played solidly, made good choices, picked a good deck, and well, they were rewarded. So definitely a well earned win for them. And congratulations on taking down the VML.
Sky, any words here for Jacob, our VML winner season 9?
Solid play all around. I love the use of the Archfiend there, and I feel like it should see more play on the Rakdos deck. You know, we may all get scared by the you lose the game, but Jacob did anything but lose the game tonight with that Archfiend. Well played, and congratulations to both players.
And I see here someone in chat saying, that's my boyfriend. So a partner, definitely really proud here of Jacob. And I am really happy to see that he was able to win here at the VML. I'm not sure if we are getting an interview or not. I know that times can be a bit tricky. As maybe some of you can notice, the lighting is getting better and better for me because it's getting morning. It's right now, let me see, 6:50 a.m. for me. So after VML casting, I'm going to have a nice breakfast. But Phoebe, do you know if we are going to have an interview today here with Jacob or if it's not possible?
Well, I would love to have had warning about that beforehand, but at this point, no, I don't believe that we would be able to have a an interview with Jacob. But I do want to offer my most sincere congratulations to them. Uh, very good job.
I don't know if the Twitch chat could hear or not, but Phoebe, our amazing producer here, is congratulating Jacob. Unfortunately, we cannot have an interview, but this is a wrap for season 9, and I'm so excited. VML prizes are better than ever. We have 8 more players qualified for the finals. We have already 16, 8 more to go. So you cannot miss that season 10, which is going to be the next season that's going to happen soon. So stay tuned for those announcements. Definitely, I'm going to play again if I can. I'm going as soon as it goes open. I'll try to sign up as always. And we would like to once again thank our amazing sponsors, Good Luck i5 and Wizards of the Coast. Without them, this league couldn't be possible. We really appreciate it. Also, thank you for my amazing co-hosts today. Sky, amazing regular here on the stream, and Arya. I mean, Arya is the VML Hall of Famer, and we know how much we are all so proud of you. And it was amazing casting with you both here tonight, and we had amazing magic. Any final words, Sky?
No, I would like to thank Arya for being here again. Thank you so much for all of your insight. It's always wonderful to have you here. And again, congratulations just on everything you've achieved. Filipa, it's been wonderful getting to know you this season, and it's been wonderful casting with you. So thank you so much for all of your hard work. And of course, thank you so much to Phoebe, who put so much work into the VML. Our rock, we could not do this without you. So thank you so much, Phoebe. We appreciate you.
Arya, as our guest, VML Hall of Famer, any final words here for us tonight in our season ending, season 9?
Yeah, just thank you so much for having me on. It was so wonderful casting with you two again, working with Phoebe again, and getting to be back in the VML, kind of where it all started for me, magic wise. It's so wonderful to be here, see the community in chat, watch those high stakes match with fantastic players. It's just a wonderful experience, and thank you for having me on.
That's going to be a wrap. Thank you everyone for watching. We will be back for season 10 very soon. Congratulations for our top 8 and a special congratulations for Jason for winning the VML and making it to the Hall of Fame. Very happy to be here and we'll see you very soon.
Congrats, Jacob.
Yay, party!